If you discovered that a simple grass carp in your pond could breathe dragonfire and that your pets were capable of slaying gods, what would you do? As the master of Luochen Peak, you spend your days incessantly scolding a group of mythical beasts, not only criticizing a quasi-emperor level great yellow dog for being too ostentatious, but also complaining that 10,000-year-old spirit fruits are unpalatable. This is because you transmigrated into a cultivation world and are terrified of death, leading you to arm your entire mountain to the teeth. You intended to rely on your reputation as a useless peak master to survive until the end of time, yet the sect kept forcing you to accept disciples. You carelessly chose a talentless second-grade trash disciple, unaware that she is actually a reincarnated empress undergoing a new cultivation path. When she walked into the back mountain with a cold and arrogant expression, seeing the divine herbs that covered the ground like mere weeds, this empress, who once dominated the entire universe, was so shocked that her Tao heart shattered on the spot. The simple-looking great yellow dog before her possessed the cultivation of a quasi-emperor, emitting a pressure that made it difficult for anyone to draw breath. Even the aura deep within its bloodline was that of the Qilin, a mythical beast that had vanished eons ago. A Quasi-Emperor Qilin was serving as a guard dog here on Luochen Peak for you. Then she looked toward the fish in the pond, each one radiating an extraordinary spiritual aura, and even the weeds and bamboo in the forest exuded the terrifying presence of ancient medicinal herbs. Her initial intention to use you and find a patron was instantly crushed by the reality before her. What kind of divine place is this Luochen Peak? You, unbothered by her shock, led her inside and casually mentioned that you wanted to help her awaken her physique. She appeared obedient on the surface, but in her heart, she was sneering. A mere Schwanling realm cultivator wants to help an empress awaken? Truly, he overestimates his own capabilities. At the critical moment, you paused and gave the great yellow dog a kick. How about you handle this, great yellow? Be quick about it, I am in a hurry to sleep. Yilingshang, who was still silently mocking you, watched as the great yellow dog simply blew a breath of air toward her. In an instant, golden Qilin essence flooded her meridians. Within just a few breaths, her cultivation soared on the spot. Even the origin of the saint soldier physique within her body began to tremble violently. A single breath of this energy was equivalent to 10 years of her arduous cultivation in her past life. You then brought her to the back mountain, a wilderness overgrown with weeds. Yi Ling Shuang initially assumed you had brought her there to clear the weeds. To her astonishment, as you casually brushed the overgrown grass aside, it revealed 9-leaf phoenix tail grass, 10,000-year nanzhou, and even the legendary dragon soul grass. These divine herbs, enough to drive the entire world into a frenzy, were treated by you as if they were mere cabbage, casually discarded in the wasteland. As she gazed at the scene before her, her heart bled with agony. This was no vegetable garden. It was clearly an eternal medicinal field that even the gods would kill to possess. You spoke with such nonchalance, saying you only planted them for fun, which nearly drove this reincarnated empress to madness on the spot. Looking at the 9-leaf phoenix tail grass and 10,000-year nanzhou covered by weeds, Yiling Shuang's eyes nearly bulged from their sockets. What she saw were divine herbs capable of sparking world-ending wars. To you, they were nothing more than an unkempt patch of barren land. A scene that left her even more devastated was about to unfold. The great yellow dog lunged forward, gnawing wildly on a 10,000-year-old fruit, chewing the divine herb as if it were a common bean. You even chided the dog and gave it a kick, scolding it for eating so much, fearing it wouldn't be able to move later. Yiling Shuang was completely petrified. This man and his dog were truly the greatest wasters of resources in the entire heavens and myriad realms. Next, you pointed to some large radishes nearby, telling someone with low cultivation like her to simply take a few bites. She looked closely and realized they were clearly 3,000-year-old purple blood ginseng. With complex emotions, she took a small bite. The pure medicinal power erupted within her body in an instant, and her cultivation soared like a rocket, shooting from the 4th layer of qi refining directly to the peak of the 9th. Even the origin of the saint soldier physique within her began to dissolve rapidly under the surge of this medicinal force. Just as she was filled with joy, thinking she was about to break through to the foundation establishment stage, you looked at the system panel and saw only a 5% awakening progress. You fell into deep contemplation. After consuming a 3,000-year-old divine herb, how could there be so little progress? You realized this wasn't just taking on a disciple, it was like raising a bottomless pit. It seemed that unless you used some truly potent medicine on this empress, this awakening mission would remain forever out of reach. You watched Yiling Shuang, who was struggling to refine the medicinal power, and could not help but grumble inwardly, is merely consuming medicine enough? One must cultivate both internally and externally. As your gaze swept over her, a plan took root in your mind. Simply having your disciple eat radishes would not be enough. What if your master took you to bathe? Yiling Shuang was momentarily stunned, wondering if this meant a medicinal bath. If one uses divine herbs to concoct a medicinal bath, the effects are undoubtedly more potent than consuming them raw. A glint of anticipation flickered in her eyes. I thank you, master. Although you appear incredibly unreliable, you are truly generous when it comes to resources. As long as she could become powerful, it mattered not who you were. She then followed you deep into the back mountain. As you ventured deeper, the spiritual energy grew so dense it took on a mist-like form. Every breath left her lungs feeling invigorated and cool, until you reached a secluded valley, where in the center lay a small pond 3 zhang wide. The pond water was crystal clear and the surface shimmered with a milky white mist. Yileng was left speechless. The concentration of spiritual energy here was more than 10 times greater than the core area of the outer sect. You spoke nonchalantly, claiming this was merely an ordinary spiritual spring. You added that you usually come here to bathe and relax whenever you are tired from cultivation. Yileng no longer had the strength to complain internally. This was clearly the spiritual eye of a supreme-grade spiritual vein, perhaps even the legendary dragon vein from the outside world. Such a place would be a strictly forbidden sect area, yet you used it for bathing. You truly were a man of excessive waste. Not wanting to pry further, you pointed to the pond and urged her to enter. Absorb as much as you can, you said. But be warned, the water is somewhat cold. You must endure it. Ling Shuang scoffed inwardly. How could one possessing the supreme saint physique fear the cold? Without a moment's hesitation, she dove into the pond. Unexpectedly, the moment she touched the water, her entire body went rigid. It was not the cold she had anticipated at all. It felt as though she had leaped into a vat of boiling oil. This was not merely water. This energy was as violent as wildfire. It surged through her pores, tearing into her body, forcing a harrowing scream from Yileng. The pain, it was agonizing. This was no bath. It was as if she had been thrown into a furnace to be roasted. Was this truly the cool breeze you spoke of? The spiritual energy was so volatile that even the earth essence could not circulate it. Her body felt on the verge of rupture and her consciousness began to fade. Who could have foreseen that a majestic empress would suffer such a grievance, perishing ignominiously in a bath? In this critical moment, hanging by a thread, you moved with the speed of a hawk, grabbing her by the scruff of her neck as if she were a mere chick. You hoisted her directly out of the water. Yileng collapsed onto the grass, panting heavily, unable to move even a single finger. That was dangerous. She had been moments away from exploding. You squatted nearby, fixing your gaze upon her as if she were an utter fool. Tell me, how could you be so dim-witted? This spirit spring is connected directly to the core of the earth's veins. Even a cultivator at the soul formation stage would not dare to absorb it directly. Yet a mere novice at the chi refining stage like yourself dares to leap in. You certainly have a reckless amount of courage. Upon hearing this, Yileng nearly coughed up a mouthful of blood. Even the soul formation stage dares not absorb it? Then why did you not say so sooner? You even claimed you used it to bathe regularly. Are you truly my master? You continued to mutter aside. If I had not fished you out quickly, you would have already exploded like a firework. By then my Luochen Peak would have been blown into a crater, and I would have had to fill it back in. What a tiresome nuisance. Yileng was left completely speechless. I narrowly escaped death, she thought, and all you care about is whether your mountain peak would be left with a crater? Seeing the resentment in her eyes, you pulled a porcelain bottle from your robes. Very well, stop pretending to be dead. Take this to stabilize your energy. Yileng recoiled in vigilance. She was truly frightened now, wondering what other lethal trap this might be. You rolled your eyes and forcibly stuffed the elixir into her mouth. In an instant, a refreshing warmth flowed through her entire body. Her damaged meridians began to heal at a pace visible to the naked eye. The once violent spiritual energy became remarkably docile. In just a few breaths, Yileng felt as if she had been reborn. Not only that, her meridians had doubled in width, and her cultivation had firmly settled at the peak of the 9th level of chi refining. A foundation like this would be enough to put the geniuses of the Holy Lands to shame. A tempest of shock surged within Yileng heart. Another saint-grade elixir, this nominal master of hers was the height of unreliability, yet his generosity was truly terrifying. She straightened her robes and bowed respectfully. Thank you for saving my life, master. This time she was truly sincere. Yet you looked at her with utter disdain, telling her to stop these empty theatrics. You are simply too weak. You could barely endure the soak for a mere moment. At this rate, when will you ever awaken your constitution? Yileng could only roll her eyes repeatedly. To be immersed in spirit fluid that even a spirit transformation expert would not dare touch, to survive half a day without perishing, is that really considered weak? You anxiously consulted the system in your mind, only to find the progress was at a mere 15 cur at this pace. How long would this nourishment take? You furrowed your brows. It was clear that conventional methods were insufficient. If you wanted that reward of 2,000 years of cultivation, you had to use potent medicine. You suddenly raised your head, your gaze fixed intently on Yileng. Disciple, it seems your body remains far too fragile. No, Yileng felt a chill run down her spine under your gaze, and she instinctively retreated. Master, what are you intending to do? With a wave of your hand, a multitude of jars and vials appeared, surrounding you both. The ground was soon littered with spiritual fruits, casting a brilliant, multicolored glow. The radiance of supreme treasures filled the air, 9-turn golden pills, Bodhi seeds, enlightenment fruits, and heavenly Tao leaves, leaving Yileng wide-eyed in shock. Any single one of these items would be enough to incite a bloody conflict across the cultivation world, yet you dumped them before her as if they were mere refuse. You looked at your disciple, who stood there as if carved from stone. Too weak. Eat more, finish all of this. You gestured toward a pile of supreme treasures capable of allowing a mortal to ascend to immortality in broad daylight. Your tone was as indifferent as if you were distributing common trash. These were merely snacks I kept for leisure. If you require them, you may have them all. You issued a stern order. From this day forward, aside from cultivation, she was to focus solely on consumption. Only when everything was finished would the next phase begin. Yi Longshuang turned to stone, staring at the mountain of divine pills and sacred fruits. She felt this was truly inhuman, using 9-turn golden pills as a staple meal, and treating immortal peaches as mere hydration. Was this Luochen Peak a heaven or a hell? She even harbored a morbid suspicion that she might become the first woman in history to die from overeating. For the next half-month, Yi Longshuang finally understood the meaning of suffering disguised as joy. The 9-turn golden pills, which would drive nascent soul experts to madness, were treated by you as simple after-meal desserts. 3 pills a day, forcibly nourishing her with the Buddhist supreme treasure, the Bodhi seed. You forced her to keep it in her mouth throughout the day, until she was compelled to reach enlightenment even while walking. As for holy medicines like the flat peach or the vermilion fruit, she treated them with insatiable greed, taking a bite when she felt hungry, snacking on them whenever she pleased. As a result, in merely half a month, her cultivation base ascended like a rocket, surging uncontrollably, straight to the late stage of foundation establishment. Even more shocking was the awakening of her physique, the ice spirit body which followed suit. With every movement of her hands and feet, she radiated a bone-chilling aura, and even her temperament grew cold, aloof, and solitary. However, this absolute indulgence quickly transformed into a form of torture. After consuming divine elixirs as if they were mere candies, Ye Lingchang became desensitized to them, eventually finding them nauseating at the mere sight. She began to reminisce about the hardship of her past days, when she had to meticulously calculate every morsel of food just to survive, because now she felt no different than a pig being force-fed for slaughter. What shattered her resolve even further was that the great yellow dog you kept was also eating, and you actually scolded her for eating too slowly. You then casually grabbed a handful of golden core elixirs and tossed them to the dog. The great yellow dog licked its chops, swallowed them whole without even chewing, and wagged its tail at her in triumph. Yi Lingchang broke down on the spot. In her past life, she had nearly lost her life fighting over a single golden core, yet now she was living a life beneath that of a dog. The crushing sensation of defeat, having lost even to a dog, finally forced her to reevaluate who you truly were. Someone who could casually pull out divine elixirs and holy artifacts and keep a great emperor-level Qilin as a pet. How could he possibly be simple? She realized that she had been putting on an act in front of an existence far surpassing a great emperor. This was no mere hermit, this was a complete and utter suppression. At this moment, you glanced at the system panel and frowned. Half a month had passed, and the progress of her physique awakening had only reached 50%. The divine elixirs and holy fruits were nearly exhausted, but the energy required became increasingly terrifying the further one progressed. Observing Yi Lingchang's nauseated expression, you decided to change tactics and apply a stronger remedy. Disciple, since you seem so tired of these delicacies, your master will take you to change your palate. You led her to a small courtyard atop the mountain with a squinting smile, pointing at a giant wooden barrel steaming in the yard. Yi Lingchang recalled the trauma of the spirit spring from before, her limbs trembling in terror. Master, must I really soak in this? You must, you refused firmly, urging her to shed her outer robes and step inside. Yi Lingchang had no choice but to succumb, dragging her feet as she climbed into the barrel. To her surprise, the water temperature this time was quite mild, and it emitted a faint, refreshing fragrance. Just as she let out a sigh of relief, you walked over to the side of the barrel, grabbed a handful of withered leaves, and the moment the leaf touched the water, a strange phenomenon abruptly occurred. The withered leaf suddenly turned a vibrant, verdant green. Dense inscriptions of the great Tao manifested upon its surface. An indescribable, mysterious fragrance began to permeate the air. Yi Lingxuan inhaled only once, and her soul trembled violently. Every bottleneck in her cultivation, from her past life to this, suddenly became clear. You casually grabbed a handful of withered leaves and tossed them into the tub, causing the Empress, who once traversed the heavens, to lose her composure on the spot. Those were not mere rotten leaves, but the enlightenment tea leaves that could allow a cultivator to attain immortality in an instant. This supreme divine treasure, impossible to find in 10,000 kalpas, you actually used for her bath. Yi Lingxuan stared at the emerald water, unable to even speak clearly, yet you wore an expression of disdain. This pile of useless leaves, you've hoarded so many, yet they usually have no use at all. Listen to how unreasonable that sounds. Countless ancient patriarchs would beg for a single leaf in vain, yet in your hands it serves only as bathwater. Yi Lingxuan was completely stunned, the last remnants of her pride vanishing into thin air in an instant. Before a great emperor, she might still retain a shred of arrogance, but before a freak who treats supreme divine artifacts with such reckless disregard, she felt like a mere country bumpkin. Thus, she silently submerged herself into the water and began to absorb its energy frantically. A terrifying opportunity, potent enough to defy the heavens and change one's fate. The very next second, the system notifications rang out in rapid succession. The awakening progress of your Supreme Saint body was filled to completion. 2,000 years of cultivation were instantly bestowed upon you. Your strength surged once again. Meanwhile, Ye Lingxuan in the tub reached an even more terrifying state, stepping into the Golden Core realm in a single leap. In just 1 month, progressing from a mere mortal straight to the Golden Core realm, such a rate of advancement is truly unprecedented. You looked at the next stage of the system's mission, a wicked smile tugging at the corners of your mouth. You intend to take her to sweep through the sect assembly, crushing the prodigies of Luochen Peak, sending a Golden Core realm divine body to bully those in the Foundation establishment stage. This is no longer a competition. This is clearly the strong preying upon the weak. Although Ye Lingxuan had broken through, you glanced at her and noticed her foundation was unstable, and her combat experience was absurdly lacking. You carried a lounge chair into the courtyard to sunbathe, casually tossing a half-eaten fruit seed toward the great yellow dog. You solemnly declared that the dog would be fully responsible for her upcoming combat training, even specifically instructing that as long as she didn't die, anything was permitted. Practice however you wish. Yi Lengshuang stood there, questioning the very meaning of her existence. If you had instructed her personally, it would be one thing, but to be trained by a dog was entirely another. After all, she was once an empress. Yet here she was, forced to spar with a stray dog. Da Huang cast a glance at her, its eyes filled with such profound disdain that it seemed to say, training a novice like this is a tedious waste of time. You paid her thoughts no mind, yawning before heading back to your room to catch up on sleep. The empress, who was once peerless in her era, could only stand dazed and motionless in the biting wind. Confronted by a stray dog that had reached the Quasi-Emperor realm, the unfortunate souls at Quasi-Emperor Peak still had no idea what kind of monster awaited them a month from now. You never imagined that the stray dog you casually sent out would force your disciple, the Reincarnated Empress, to doubt her own path. On the back mountain of Luochen Peak, Ye Lungshuang exerted every ounce of her strength. She frantically channeled her golden core, manifesting ice shards that blotted out the sky and covered the earth, surging toward Da Huang with an intense freezing aura. Yet facing a lethal strike capable of instantly killing an ordinary golden core cultivator, your dog Da Huang did not even bother to lift an eyelid. Da Huang then let out a sluggish yawn, exhaling a wave of energy barely visible to the naked eye. That single ripple of air instantly reduced those razor-sharp ice shards into nothing but vapor. Before Yi Lengshuang could even react, Da Huang nonchalantly raised a front paw. It utilized neither demonic energy nor profound laws, relying purely on its physical strength to press downward. Suddenly, a terrifying pressure descended from the heavens, and with a thunderous roar, the earth collapsed, forming a crater several dozen meters deep. Like a fly swatted from the air, Ye Lengshuang was embedded deep into the ground, blood spraying from her wounds. She looked up in despair at Da Huang, which was now wagging its tail at the edge of the pit. Half the bones in her body were already fractured. The creature hadn't even exerted 1/1,000,000th of its true strength. This golden core stage empress had nearly perished on the spot. From that day forth, she entered the darkest period of her life. Long before dawn each day, Da Huang would toss both her and her bed into the back mountain. She was tormented relentlessly. If she wasn't being kicked around the mountain like a ball, she was being chased and scorched by the Qilin divine fire. Even more terrifying were the spirit beasts you kept in the back mountains, any one of which could end her life at a moment's notice. Even the rooster that strolled about during the day would, at the slightest provocation, unleash an attack comparable to the peak of the nascent soul realm. The carp, unremarkable within the pond, could pierce a massive mountain with a single jet of water. Who could have foreseen that under such life-or-death pressure, Ye Lingshuang's combat prowess would undergo a transformative metamorphosis? Yet this surge in strength brought her no joy. Instead, it only deepened the dread rooted within her heart. That afternoon, you were resting leisurely in the courtyard, one hand fanning Da Huang, the other holding a plate of fragrant roasted tier 6 spirit beast meat, telling it to eat slowly for no one would compete with it. You've worked hard today. Nourish yourself well. Da Huang ate until its mouth was covered in grease, its eyes gazing at you with fawning satisfaction. Yi Lingshuang, standing not far away, witnessed this scene as if struck by a thunderbolt. In her past life, she had encountered countless prideful and arrogant divine beasts. None possessed such a sycophantic demeanor, yet a Quasi-Emperor Qilin was acting like a mere servant before you. This could only mean that your strength was so terrifying that even a Quasi-Emperor viewed being your pet as in supreme honor. Her gaze toward you had shifted entirely. You were undoubtedly a legendary immortal of the mortal realm hiding in plain sight. Deep into the night, Ye Lingshuang recalled every absurd event at the back mountain, breaking into a cold sweat from the sheer horror of it. She had once witnessed with her own eyes a tier 4 demon beast, equivalent to the golden core stage, approach the pond to drink only to be swallowed in a single gulp by a goldfish no larger than a palm. This was no mere Luochen Peak, it was clearly a forbidden zone of life and death, and in that moment she finally grasped the profound wisdom of your reclusive life upon the mountain. Thus she made her resolve, she would never again think of showing off, and even took the initiative to suppress her own golden core cultivation. You were completely unaware that your disciple had been left utterly shaken by the terrifying scenes at the back mountain, fearing that having joined the sect for only a month, revealing her golden core breakthrough, would draw the relentless pursuit of hidden ancient monsters. Without a second thought, Ye Lingshuang channeled the breath concealment art from her past life. This cultivation manual could mask one's aura without a single flaw, and unless the opponent's realm was truly earth-shattering, they would never detect the slightest trace of her true strength. Immediately, the golden core aura radiating from her body began to plummet rapidly. In a heartbeat, her cultivation settled firmly. After all, consuming the resources of a peak master while you are only at the 9th level of Qi refining, at best only qualifies you as a primary level talent, and will certainly not attract anyone's unwanted attention. Thereafter, Ye Lingshuang looked at herself in the mirror with satisfaction. Her eyes, previously sharp, instantly turned profound and reserved, and the corners of her mouth curled into a curve of extreme confidence. From this day forward, I am simply the unremarkable senior sister of Luochen Peak. The following day, Yilingxuang, you were lounging in the courtyard, sunning yourself, habitually sweeping your divine sense over your disciple, who had just stepped out the door. However, in the very next second, you were stunned into silence. This girl had clearly reached the golden core stage just a month ago, yet her current cultivation base had regressed back to the 9th level of qi refining, and a wave of wild joy surged within your heart. Originally, you had been worried that this girl's realm was rising too rapidly, easily inviting trouble. After all, the old relics within the sect are far from blind. Yet you never imagined she would personally grasp the essence of seeking the Tao. You could not help but sigh inwardly. The Reincarnated Empress truly possesses high enlightenment, immediately following which you quickly suppressed your joy, feigning a look of complete shock as if you had just discovered this. With your cultivation, how can you only be at the 9th level of qi refining? I recall that you had already achieved foundation establishment, did you not? Lingshuang immediately feigned panic and bowed her head, expressing with great reverence that her foundations were unstable and that she had decided to cripple her own cultivation to temper herself anew, further feeling that the world outside was too perilous, desiring only to cultivate in peace under your protection. These words truly struck a chord deep within your heart. You were so moved that you suddenly sat up from your rocking chair, heaping praise upon her in rapid succession. Thus you seized the opportunity, speaking with such enthusiasm that spittle flew, crazily drilling your philosophy of seeking the Tao into her. For a cultivator, the most important thing is not how high your cultivation is, but how long you can live. Those so-called secret realms are nothing but death traps intended to slaughter the younger generation. Yi Lingshuang listened and nodded repeatedly. At this moment, the two of you, master and disciple, had reached an unprecedented consensus on the path of cultivation. From then on, Luochen Peak began to perform a peerless grand play. A majestic figure of the great emperor realm like yourself spends every day in coarse robes, acting as a humble teacher in the countryside. Meanwhile, Yilingshang, the reincarnated empress, fumbled with a notched iron sword as she clumsily practiced basic sword forms. She intentionally slipped and tumbled to the ground, feigning great pain. You stepped forward, hands clasped behind your back. You began to offer guidance with a solemn, earnest tone, but her hand trembled, sending her sword flying, nearly striking the great yellow dog who was watching the drama unfold nearby. The great yellow dog's eyes widened, his expression one of utter disbelief. Only last night, this girl was secretly in the back mountains, cultivating an earth-rank sword manual from the S600, yet today she couldn't even keep a firm grip on a crude iron blade. Even more absurd was the sight of a great emperor such as yourself teaching elementary sword techniques. You, however, chose to ignore the great yellow dog's look of contempt. You patted your disciple's shoulder, lamenting her lack of natural talent. Beyond that, to maintain your persona as a talentless peak master, you sat in meditation every day, feigning that you had encountered a bottleneck. At times, you would shout loudly about achieving enlightenment. At others, you would sigh in feigned agony over your inability to break through to the nascent soul stage. Yilingchang stood by, her face filled with concern as she offered words of comfort, yet deep down, she knew the truth all too well. If you were truly unable to break through to the nascent soul stage, then every nascent soul cultivator in the world might as well commit suicide collectively. At midnight, she would light a lamp to pretend she was staying up late to toil over her cultivation, while in reality she was frantically refining the elixir, the 9-turn golden pellet you had tossed to her earlier that day. Who could have imagined that this place, seemingly a gathering of the talentless and a bastion of decline, was actually the greatest den of schemers in the entire Divine Province continent? But play acting is play acting. You were both secretly probing for the other's hidden trump cards. You were contemplating how to ensure she would narrowly defeat that Qi condensation middle stage inner disciple in the upcoming sect tournament. Meanwhile, Yilingshang wanted nothing more than to uncover just how deeply you had hidden your true strength. When least expected, a sudden accident struck. Yiling Cheng pretended to lose control of her ice element power, unleashing a terrifying surge of cold energy capable of freezing a golden core cultivator in an instant, which swept suddenly to you as you sat sipping tea. In that precarious moment, you merely bowed your head and blew gently into your teacup. The lethal chill was devoured and vanished without a trace in the blink of an eye. You leisurely took a sip of tea and remarked, "The tea is a bit hot. I shall wait a moment before drinking." Yilingchang stood frozen in place, her heart churning like a stormy sea. Was this the legendary ability to command the heavens with a mere breath? This was the mark of absolute mastery over the laws of the world. With a single exhale, you had neutralized her full power strike. This strength of yours is truly unfathomable. She immediately resolved herself. From now on, when in your presence, she must play it safe to the extreme, never revealing even the slightest flaw. In the blink of an eye, a month passed and the sect grand competition finally commenced. You stroked your chin, looking at Yi Langshuang before you with an anxious expression. Although this girl had concealed her cultivation, you still felt a lingering sense of unease. You cleared your throat, adopting the posture of an otherworldly master. Disciple, in the path of cultivation, the most important thing is keeping up appearances. Eldest disciple, your only goal this time is to win in a truly miraculous fashion. Do you know what it means to win miraculously? It means making others believe you are on the verge of defeat every single time. At the very last moment, rely on pure luck to pull off a narrow victory. To support this charade, you casually pulled a pile of junk from your system storage and stuffed it into her hands. A rusted bronze bell, a notched wooden sword, and talismans that looked like mere child's doodles. Yi Langshuang looked at the pile of scrap in her hands, her eyelids twitching uncontrollably. She had no idea that these trinkets, which you dismissed as moldy garbage, actually contained the sealed full-power strike of a nascent soul great elder. You watched as she solemnly put away the treasures, feeling jubilant inside. With a disciple this sensible, this grand performance would surely go off without a hitch. On the day of the competition, the arena was swarming with people, and you, the trash peak master, retreated into a corner to remain unseen. To your misfortune, Peak Master Zhao Lai of the Scarlet Flame Peak approached, spewing mockery and boasting of his own genius disciple Xiao Si. Upon hearing that Yi Langshuang was only at the 9th level of qi condensation, Zhao Aolai openly burst into laughter, his eyes filled with nothing but contempt and derision. You lowered your head and sighed, putting on a weak, cowardly act, unable to muster the face to argue back. In reality, you were sneering internally. You old fool, you'll be the one crying in a moment. Shortly thereafter, the first match officially began. Yi Langshuang took the notched wooden sword onto the stage. Her opponent, Li Xiaofan, was already at the early stage of foundation establishment. Looking at the frail young girl before him, he even generously declared he would yield 3 moves to her. Who could have expected that at that exact moment, Yi Langshuang would suddenly slip, her entire body lunging violently toward the ground. The wooden sword in her hand flew loose, hurtling directly toward Li Xiaofan's face. At that instant, Li Xiaofan felt a sudden dizziness, his reaction slowed by half a beat. The wooden sword struck him squarely in the face. The damage was minimal, but the humiliation was absolute. Li Xiaofan was so angry his entire body trembled. Meanwhile, Ye Longshuang apologized profusely, insisting repeatedly that it was just a slip of the foot. You sat in the high stands, struggling to suppress a laugh, a brilliant slip, a masterful excuse of not intending it. It seems that in the art of performance, this girl has truly mastered your legacy. For a foundation establishment novice like Li Xiaofan, caught off guard, this single moment of distraction was fatal. He bowed his head in frustration and conceded the match. Even though he felt aggrieved, being defeated by a junior sister, striking him across the face with a wooden sword before the eyes of the gathered crowd, he truly had no dignity left to argue his case, especially when the other party was offering apologies with such desperate feigned remorse. A flicker of craftiness flashed through Yi Lingshuang's eyes, only to be instantly replaced by a look of pleasant surprise as she picked up the wooden sword and thanked him repeatedly. Immediately after, the presiding elder sonorously declared Luochen Feng the victor. A wave of commotion rippled through the audience below. No one had anticipated such an outcome. A mere novice at the 9th level of qi refining had used a broken wooden sword to defeat a foundation establishment cultivator. While the masses assumed this girl had simply stumbled upon pure, unadulterated luck, the sharp-eyed elders observing from the high platform had already discerned the clues. Zhao Lai, the peak master of Qian, began to secretly keep a close watch on her. Who could have expected that the subsequent matches would transform into a personal showcase for Yi Lingshuang? She pushed the strange Shengli cultivation technique you taught her to its absolute limit, appearing time and again as if she were on the verge of death. Yet, whenever the situation reached a critical breaking point, she always managed to rely on absurd fortune or bizarre little tricks to stage a desperate comeback. If it wasn't the opponent suddenly slipping and falling, it was her pulling out a tattered talisman, exploding it until her opponent's face was scorched black, or at times that rusty bronze bell of hers emitting a crisp resonant chime. Seizing the moment when the opponent was caught off guard, she would strike them flying with a single blow of her sword. Watching Yi Lingshuang secure yet another narrow victory, Zhao Li spoke with cutting sarcasm, mocking that your disciple relied solely on luck. You immediately feigned a look of worry. Sighing in agreement and with a thick skin, you even countered by arguing that luck is also a form of strength. Zhao Li let out a cold snort on the spot, declaring that he wanted to see how long she could keep up this act once she faced a truly powerful expert. You lowered your head, appearing submissive, but inside you were already overjoyed. You were also eager to see exactly what this precious disciple of his, whom he boasted about so much, was truly made of. In the blink of an eye, Yi Lingshuang miraculously advanced to the final round. Standing opposite her now was the unparalleled genius of Qian Peak C2. Relying on his grade 7 talent and the hidden trump cards provided by Zhao Lai, this boy had crushed all opposition on his way up, becoming arrogant to the extreme. Clad in fiery red robes like a young god of flames, he looked at Yi Lingshuang with overbearing pride, demanding she surrender. Yi Lingshuang immediately recoiled, timidly begging him to show mercy. C2 was not appeased. Instead, he let out a cold laugh and struck without warning. Boom! With a thunderous roar, the violent crimson spiritual energy erupted into raging flames. With a single strike, the giant hand sent both him and his sword flying. He slammed into the ground, a miserable trail of fresh blood spilling from the corner of his mouth. In truth, after the brutal special training imposed by Da Huang, an attack of this magnitude barely counted as a scratch. That mouthful of blood was merely a performance. He had bitten his own tongue to force it out. Immediately after, he gritted his teeth and pulled that rusted bronze bell from his chest. Xiaoxi looked down at him from above, his eyes filled with nothing but contempt. Not only did he mock the object as mere scrap metal, he directed his hostilities squarely at him, openly ridiculing him as a talentless good-for-nothing before the entire crowd. He claimed that the disciples raised by the Peak Master were equally useless, and he even arrogantly clamored that the sect should long ago have stripped Luochen Peak of its resources. As these words left his lips, the entire audience was stunned. Even the examiner on the high platform turned pale with rage in an instant. Even he did not dare to be so presumptuous in public. You, however, remained unmoved, sitting on your reclining chair, a cold, sharp smile curving upon your lips. Very well, boy. Since you are so determined to court death, do not blame me for being ruthless. You decisively used your divine sense to transmit a message to Yiling Chong on the stage, telling him that he no longer needed to hide his strength, and that he should reveal just enough power to teach this boy a lesson he would never forget. Upon hearing your command, the expression in Yiling Chong's eyes shifted instantly. The cowardly and submissive facade he had maintained vanished without a trace, replaced by a chilling, oppressive dominance that made it difficult for onlookers to breathe. He suddenly raised his head, staring fixedly at Xiaoxi, and roared, "Who did you call a good-for-nothing?" At that exact moment, a terrifying surge of freezing energy erupted violently from within his body. The entire arena was frozen solid in the blink of an eye. A massive ice-bone dragon, pulsating with overwhelming momentum, rapidly coalesced behind him. That world-destroying aura was clearly far beyond the 9th level of Qi refining. It was a terrifying existence that surpassed even a typical Peak Foundation establishment cultivator. The entire crowd gasped in unison, drawing in a sharp breath. Everyone stared fixedly at the stage, at that cold, arrogant figure who looked like an ice goddess descended from the heavens. Witnessing this scene, Xiaoxi's legs turned to jelly. The cultivation base he had been so proud of felt, in the face of this aura, like nothing more than an ant. Before he could even recover from his shock, Yiling Chong simply waved his hand in a casual motion, and the colossal ice dragon, surging with a momentum capable of crushing all resistance, pounced violently as the desperate flames of spiritual energy he had ignited were extinguished in an instant. A jarring sound of freezing echoed throughout the arena, and the genius Xiaoxi, who but a second ago was brimming with boundless arrogance, was now frozen stiff into a flawless ice sculpture. You had merely instructed your disciple to reveal a fraction of his strength, yet never could you have foreseen that he would utterly overwhelm his opponent in a single stroke. Watching Xiaoxi transformed into a massive ice statue upon the stage, your lips twitched uncontrollably. How were you to manage him in the future? However, catching a glimpse of the face of Zhao Lai, master of Qian Peak, standing beside you, only one word came to mind: satisfaction. Immediately following this, the sound of rhythmic gulping broke the heavy silence. Who could believe that a newcomer, having joined the sect for only a month, could instantly slay a mid-stage foundation establishment cultivator, and furthermore possess the peerless talent of a 7th grade rank? Not only that, but the terrifying aura he emitted now had reached the earth-shaking level of the foundation establishment great perfection. To transcend such a heaven-defying gap in merely 30 days is more legendary than the tales of ancient gods reborn. In an instant, the eyes of everyone, filled with the terror of seeing a ghost, converged upon your corner. Everyone was on the verge of madness. What heaven-defying methods had you, the recognized waste of Xuanling realm, been concealing all along? At this moment, Zhao Li was trembling with rage. He gritted his teeth and interrogated you. What forbidden elixir did you feed him? You did not even bother to lift an eyelid. With an air of calm indifference, you remarked that Luochen Peak was destitute and impoverished. You laid your cards on the table, claiming that the disciple was simply gifted, and that your casual guidance was all he needed to comprehend the path. At this, Zhao Lai completely collapsed. Could mere casual guidance truly produce a foundation establishment expert? Did you think everyone was a fool? Facing his impotent fury, you let out a cold laugh, stating flatly that this was an internal matter of your peak, and it was not his place to point fingers or dictate. At that very moment, a crisp cracking sound erupted from the stage, and the thick layer of ice shattered with a roar as Xiaoxi fell heavily to the ground like a tattered sack. The extreme chill had instantly shattered his meridians, and his peerless cultivation base, painstakingly built over years, was now more than half destroyed. Zhao Lai let out a miserable, anguished cry, rushing toward the high platform like a mad dog to reach his beloved disciple. Watching him desperately channel his spirit energy, struggling in a frantic attempt to neutralize the icy chill, you know that Qian Peak has not only lost the top spot this time, but they have also utterly squandered a top-tier genius. Unexpectedly, Ye Lingkong on the other side proved himself a masterful actor. He timed the moment perfectly, biting his tongue once more, spitting out a mouthful of blood before collapsing limply to the ground. Seeing this, you immediately rushed onto the platform with a face full of feigned panic. At this critical juncture, you produced a pill. The 9-turn golden elixir radiated a blinding golden light. Without a word, you shoved it into his mouth. While pretending to stabilize his energy, you wailed loudly, lamenting why he would risk his life for such a trivial competition. Yilingkong, his mouth stuffed with the divine pill, was completely stunned, never imagining that you would dare, in front of everyone, feed him a peerless treasure capable of inciting a bloodbath. Yet in an instant he understood your charade. He immediately let out 2 weak, hacking coughs and with a look of feigned expectation asked if you had lost face. You shook your head repeatedly, shouting that you had not lost face at all, urging him to quickly refine the medicinal power, executing this perfect double act that deceived the entire audience. Everyone was convinced that Yi Ling Kang had utilized a forbidden technique, overdrawing his life force to achieve this outcome. The Great Elder took a deep breath and excitedly declared the champion of this grand tournament to be Luochen and Yiling Kong. The entire arena instantly erupted in a frenzy. Amidst the veiled, sarcastic congratulations from the other peak masters, you dragged your disciple away, frantically playing the victim and insisting that it was all merely a stroke of good luck. The Sword Peak Master seized the opportunity to mock Zhao Li mercilessly. Zhao Li was so infuriated that his entire body trembled, yet he could not utter a single word in rebuttal. At the same time, a pair of eyes in the corner of the arena remained locked onto the outer sect disciples. The notorious firebrand Nangong Manor stared with fervor at the fierce girl who relied on brute force to crush a physical cultivation expert, someone who had long suffered under the oppression of the outer sect. In her eyes, not only were you protective of your own, daring to stand firm against the peak masters, but Luochen Peak was also a place with meager resources yet profound potential. She clenched her fists tightly, determined that she must join your sect. However, just as you were basking in the joy of your victory, a crisp notification from the system suddenly echoed in your mind. The mission to win the grand tournament was successfully completed. 3,000 years of cultivation and the god-tier item, the Chaos Stone, instantly arrived in your inventory. Immediately afterward, a terrifying, indescribable surge of power descended. Power surged frantically within your body, forcing your cultivation realm to break through from the first stage of the Earth realm to the second stage. Although you desperately suppressed this heaven-shaking and earth-shattering force, even the slightest sliver of energy that leaked out for a mere fraction of a second caused Zhao Li, who was already on the verge of a violent outburst beside you, to turn his head sharply, staring intensely at you as you struggled to contain the roiling cultivation within. Unexpectedly, a second later, the system's voice resonated in your mind once more. Recruitment of the war god physique, Nangong Mani, rewarded with 8,000 years of cultivation. Your heart suddenly skipped a beat. The war god physique, that is a physical constitution even rarer than a saint-grade body, a peerless physique. Once fully cultivated, a single punch can shatter the galaxy. The physical body itself rivals an emperor-grade weapon. This is in every sense a humanoid weapon of mass destruction. Your divine sense instantly locked onto the training arena, pinpointing the fiery-spirited young woman in the corner. Very well, I have secured this disciple. You let out a long sigh, stood up, and once again became the focus of the entire arena. Just when everyone thought you were about to leave the grounds with your disciple, you pointed toward the outer sect and declared your intention to take Nangong Mani as your apprentice. The entire arena fell into a deathly silence. The expressions on the crowd's faces were as if they had seen a ghost in broad daylight. You, a genius with second-grade talent who had just claimed the championship, were now insisting on taking in a piece of trash with only third-grade talent, ignoring a sea of true geniuses to pick up a useless discard. Such a maneuver was truly unheard of. The master of Red Flame Peak Zhao Li sprang forward like a mad dog, pointing at your nose and cursing, "You are bringing shame upon the sect." You laughed coldly, casting a sidelong glance at this dancing clown. "I am the master of Luochen Peak. I deem him worthy. Is that not enough?" "It must be enough." With that single authoritative statement, Zhao Li's face flushed crimson, and he was unable to utter a single word for a long time. Meanwhile, Nangong Mani was stunned, feeling as if a brick of pure gold had fallen from the heavens and struck him square on the head. He had dreamed of entering your sect, and now that dream had become reality. He scrambled up the high platform and kowtowed to you 3 times with loud resounding thuds. Disciple Nangong Mani greets master. The very moment he performed the rite of passage, the system's rewards arrived with a thunderous roar. 4,000 years of cultivation surged through you like a torrential flood, and your aura rose frantically, stabilizing at the second stage of the Earth realm. The overwhelming sensation of controlling the life and essence of all things nearly made you cry out in triumph on the spot. You reached out a hand to help Nangong Mani up, and looking into his eyes filled with fanatical worship, you felt nothing but pure satisfaction. The Great Sect Tournament has concluded, yet you have directly activated the mountain protecting formation. Regardless of the rumors flying wildly through the air outside, you remain as immovable as a mountain, even finding the situation amusing. At this moment, Nangong Mani stands before the divine herb garden in the back mountain, terrified to the point that her soul is nearly leaving her body. 10,000-year-old Polygonum multiflorum and 9-leaf heavenly thundergrass, these divine herbs that would incite bloody conflicts and storms in the outside world, are growing across your hillside as if they were nothing more than weeds. You casually pluck a 10,000-year-old Polygonum multiflorum, dust it off and eat it directly as if it were a radish. It was all planted just for leisure. When you are hungry, you simply pull up a few to eat. Nangong Mani looks at the divine herb in her hand, feeling her worldview collapsing with a thunderous roar. However, it is not over yet. You point at the golden dog basking in the sun nearby. This is your senior brother Da Huang. From now on, he will guide your cultivation. Nangong Mani is left completely petrified, to be taught cultivation by a common stray dog. He does not realize that this seemingly ordinary golden dog is in truth a Quasi-Emperor level Qilin. Because your expression is solemn, though he is full of doubt, he has no choice but to obediently accept the order. Looking at this future goddess of war, a mysterious smile forms at the corner of your mouth. Next, you instruct Yi Langshuang to prepare that special bathtub. Nangong Mani does not yet know whether it is a nightmare or a heaven-defying fortune that is about to unveil for his life. You casually point to the bathtub. Nangong Mani reveals a look of suspicion. "Master, why does this bathwater smell like tea leaves?" With an unchanging expression, you deceive her, claiming this is a top-tier medicinal bath specially crafted by your master, urging her to soak quickly before it cools and loses its efficacy. Little did she know, as soon as this girl jumps in, her face turns deathly pale and she even lets out a miserable shriek. This is not bathing, this is clearly a form of torment. A terrifying heat like 10,000 steel needles is crazily piercing into her port. However, in the very next second, despair turns into wild ecstasy. A burst of energy, pure to the point of suffocation, explodes within her brain. Her cultivation begins. In the blink of an eye, his years of arduous cultivation proved inferior to this single tub of bathwater. He gazed at your back as you sat in the rattan chair beneath the moonlight, his expression undergoing a complete transformation. This was no talentless peak master, this was clearly a supreme deity of the cultivation world. From that moment on, Nonggong Manir was thoroughly captivated, becoming your #1 devotee. In your eyes, as long as one possesses sufficient resources, even the most foolish individual can be forged into a genius. Yet you never expected that teaching this girl would nearly cost you your life. This morning you assessed his progress, initially fearing he would fail the task, but to your surprise he took a deep breath, and his aura plummeted to the bottom in an instant, successfully masquerading as a first-level chi refining practitioner. Just as you were about to nod in approval, your entire demeanor shattered, for where he stood he had inadvertently stomped out a massive bottomless crater, reducing the surrounding bluestone to fine powder. You rubbed your throbbing temples and scolded, "Do you even understand what it means to be sophisticated? You have concealed your cultivation, but with a crater appearing at every step, who wouldn't see you as a walking humanoid beast?" Nangong Manir scratched his head, looking completely innocent. He was fundamentally unable to control the power of his war god physique. You could only sigh in resignation. "Ling Shuang, you come and instruct him. The priority is teaching him how to act with restraint." At the same time, in the main hall of Qian Peak, Zhuo Li was in a frantic rage, smashing everything in sight. With Xiaoxi crippled, he had lost all prestige, and hearing the air filled with praises for you, Lin Bei, he was about to explode with fury. Since he could not best you in the open, he resorted to treacherous schemes. Shortly after, a mission token, seemingly ordinary in nature, was delivered to Luochen Peak to eliminate demons at Black Wind Mountain. It was suspected to be 7 Foundation Establishment wolf demons, a task of extremely low difficulty. You stared at the mission token and let out a cold laugh. This old fox Zhuo Li is truly cunning. A weasel offering a New Year's greeting to a chicken has no good intentions. Such a transparent trap. You had initially intended to toss it into the trash and continue lounging, but you waved your hand at the messenger disciple. "I am not going to save the world. Leave this matter to the geniuses. At Luochen Peak we simply desired a life of leisure, waiting for the end." Yet the opposition darkened their expression and left us with a final decree. "This mission is a mandatory order from the sect. Refusal will result in the immediate revocation of your status as Peak Master." Just as you prepared to flip the table and confront them head-on, the system, which had remained dormant for 10,000 years, suddenly stirred to life, triggering a new mission. A master and disciple debut, escort your disciples on a trial and ensure their safety. The rewards include 10,000 years of cultivation, a god-tier item, and the leader's token, a life-saving artifact capable of blocking a fatal blow from an Earth realm powerhouse. Gazing upon the blinding golden light of the rewards, the refusal that had been perched on your throat vanished. You originally intended to develop in obscurity, but someone has served experience points to your doorstep. "Zhao Lai, you fool. Since you are so desperate to court death, I will graciously accept this 10,000 years of cultivation." You spun around suddenly and bellowed at the departing messenger disciple. "Stop right there!" The disciple ran back, bewildered, only to find you puffing out your chest with a gaze of righteous solemnity as you snatched the mission token and proclaimed with great virtue, "I have reconsidered. As a member of the sect, protecting the common people is a duty that cannot be refused." Luochen Peak accepts this mission. The disciple was left completely stunned. Was the person who just claimed they wanted to live a life of idle waiting merely an illusion? Deep down, you sighed to yourself. For the sake of survival, you accepted this labor. For the next half-day, you began frantically rummaging through your treasury, effectively performing a house cleaning. You bestowed a soul pearl upon Yiling Shuang, and tossed spirit walking boots to Nonggong Ma'er, even going so far as to disguise these top-tier artifacts as nothing more than tattered, worthless junk. As Yiling Shuang looked at the ragged straw sandals in her hands, her heart filled with admiration like a surging river. The master truly exhausts himself in his efforts to conceal his true strength. You, however, were even more ruthless to yourself. Beneath your green robes, you wore 7 or 8 layers of golden silk soft armor and a heart-protecting mirror, causing your frame to appear twice as large. Facing the suspicious gaze of Nonggong Ma'er, you instructed her with a serious expression, "Why fear the heat? With so many villains lurking about, safety is the absolute priority." Before departing, you gripped the paw of the great yellow dog, tears and snot streaming down your face as you ordered it to guard the house well. Afterward, the master and his 2 disciples boarded a saint-tier flying ship disguised as a broken wooden boat, heading straight for Black Wind Mountain. Unexpectedly, as you approached the destination, a foul, sinister aura washed over you laced with traces of demonic energy. Yiling Shuang's expression turned grave. "Master, this aura is wrong. This is absolutely not some mere chi-refining stage demon." Your eyelids twitched violently, and in your heart, you cursed that old tortoise Zhao Lai 800 times over. This aura was at the very least from the Golden Core stage. Zhao Lai clearly intended for you to perish here, but the mission had been accepted and the reward simply could not be forfeited. You led your disciples to suppress your cultivation signatures. Sneaking into the foot of the mountain, the path was so deathly silent that not even a bird chirped. Just then you passed by a small village nestled within the ravine, and the scene before you made it feel as though you had fallen into an ice cellar. The tables were still set with steaming hot meals, yet the entire village had vanished without a trace, leaving not even a single strand of hair behind. With no signs of combat or bloodshed, it was clear that someone had deployed a malevolent formation. Your expression darkened as you realized the gravity of the situation, and you immediately led your disciples toward the mountainside. The higher you ascended, the more oppressive the demonic aura became, nearly suffocating all who dared approach. Finally, outside a colossal cave on the mountainside, you witnessed a scene of absolute inhumane cruelty. A dozen demonic cultivators in black robes stood in a circle, and in the center lay a mountain of human remains. They were using the essence, blood, and souls of the living to frantically nourish some sinister entity within the cave. As your divine sense swept inside, you nearly shattered on the spot. Deep within that cavern lay a giant wolf, its form as massive as a mountain, its demonic core radiating a deep crimson light. It was a great demon of the nascent soul stage, on the verge of successfully taking human form. At that moment, you regretted not throwing the mission medallion directly into Zhao Li's face. You call this a Foundation establishment stage demon? Master, what should we do now? Yi Lingshuang frowned deeply as you observed the dozen demonic cultivators, each radiating murderous intent. The aura of the leader was surging toward the peak of the golden core stage. There was no longer any time to retreat. However, thinking of the 10,000 years of cultivation promised by the system interface, you gritted your teeth, deciding that the reward was worth risking your life for. Lingzhuang, handle the Foundation establishment cultivators. Deal with that brute. Remember, do not reveal your full strength. Using half of your power will suffice. No sooner had you finished speaking than the leader suddenly turned his head, his venomous gaze locking onto your hiding spot. Kill them all. The dozen demonic cultivators charged forth like rabid dogs. As a barrage of spells descended upon you, threatening to engulf the area, in that split second you let out a thunderous shout, "Disciples, attack!" Immediately after, you smoothly ducked behind your two disciples. Shamelessly you muttered, "Your master is a mage. I must maintain a suitable environment to cast my spells." Yi Lingzhong was long accustomed to your habit of selling out your disciples, and she turned to engage the Foundation establishment demonic cultivators. A ghost-headed saber swung down, aiming directly for her head, and she let out a scream. Her body suddenly tilted to the side. At that precise moment, the great blade grazed the top of her head, intentionally severing only a few strands of hair. The demonic cultivator refused to believe this, swinging his blade once more, but as her foot slipped, the blade edge missed yet again. Facing the frantic questioning of the demonic cultivator, Ye Lingshuang spoke nonsense with a grave expression. "This is the movement technique I mastered back when I was chasing wild boars with my husband." Four burly men surrounded the young girl, slashing wildly, yet they ended up panting for breath without even grazing the hem of her garment. After putting on an act for a long while, Ye Lingshuang pretended to lose her balance, lunging directly toward the blade. Just as the demonic cultivator struck down in ecstatic joy, she tossed a tattered talisman forward. To his astonishment, in the very next second, a thunderous explosion shook the heavens and the earth. That scrap of paper, which looked like mere waste, unleashed the terrifying power of a golden core stage expert. Instantly, it blasted the demonic cultivator into a pile of gore. Immediately following this, she wore a smile of feigned innocence, scattering a stack of talismans like she was tossing waste paper. A deafening, continuous series of explosions rang out. The remaining demonic cultivators were blasted into total misery, while you watched from behind, witnessing this dangerously narrow victory. Your expression was one of joy as you nodded, silently lamenting that this acting performance was truly impeccable and refined. However, the situation on Nangong Mani's side immediately spiraled completely out of control. A late-stage Foundation establishment body cultivator built like a human tank charged forward ferociously. Nangong Mani let out an excited dainty cry. Meeting the massive, crushing force head-on, she suddenly threw out a single punch. She thought to herself that she had only used a fraction of her strength. As a result, a jarring, muffled impact resounded through the air. The burly man, renowned for his defensive prowess, was sent flying backward like a kite with a broken string for dozens of zhang. With a massive crash, his entire body became embedded deep within a distant rock face. He could not be pried loose, and the entire scene fell into a deathly silence. Even the remaining demonic cultivators were struck with wide-eyed terror. Your mind buzzed with frustration, wishing you could devour this foolish disciple with your eyes. You had told her to conceal her strength, and now everything was ruined. Nangong Mani shrank back under your gaze and hurriedly pointed at the man in the wall, offering a forced justification. "I only gave him a gentle nudge. It is entirely his own fault for being so fragile." Just at this ridiculous moment, a heaven-shaking howl of a wolf tore through the air, causing loose stones at the cave entrance to tumble down violently. The demonic cultivators who had been arrogant just a moment ago didn't even have time to scream before their eyes rolled back, foam gathered at their mouths, and they fainted on the spot. Even the burly man who had been slammed into the wall by Nangong Manier suddenly spat out a mouthful of fake blood, his aura fading to the point of collapse. At this moment, your heart was seized by frantic fear. You had played a dangerous game. Although you are a great emperor, this level of pressure is not even worth a fart to you. Yet your current identity is that of a good-for-nothing in the Schwanling realm. In the face of a nascent soul cultivator, what is the standard reaction? Should you simply faint on the spot, or kneel immediately and beg for mercy? Your mind raced, desperately weighing how to act without disgracing your master's reputation. Unexpectedly, Ye Lingshuang and Nonggong Mania reacted faster. Their faces turned deathly pale as they gave an Oscar-worthy performance, frantically scrambling behind your back. Master, what kind of monster is this? Its aura is truly terrifying. Ye Lingshuang's voice trembled. The delicate balance of showing genuine fear while remaining ready to rescue you left her mentally exhausted. You hurried to play along with the charade. With a panicked expression, you shouted hoarsely at your master. I don't know whose little demon cub grew up this fast. Zhao Lai, you 1,000 times damned fool. You have truly brought ruin upon me. Just then a black giant wolf, 10 zhang in length, slowly emerged from the mountain cave. Its entire body was covered in black fur as sharp as steel needles, and its eyes glowed blood red. It was at the peak of the early nascent soul stage. Every step the beast took caused the very earth to tremble. It caught the scent of the detestable aura radiating from you all, and especially from you, the weakest of the group, which instinctively caused it to feel a flicker of fear. Yet the arrogance born from its recent transformations immediately overwhelmed its instincts. The giant wolf opened its maw, reeking of blood, and unleashed a thunderous roar. The sound waves transformed into tangible blades that swept towards you. Oh heavens, run for your lives, you shrieked at the top of your lungs. With practiced desperation, you grabbed your 2 disciples and turned to flee. Your miserable display was even worse than that of a stray dog. The leading old monster behind you let out a cold, cruel laugh. With Lord Shulang unleashed, let's see how you dance now. Suddenly, the giant wolf's hind legs tensed with immense power. Its colossal form transformed into a black streak of shadow. In a mere flash, it had already closed the distance and was right behind you. The wolf's claw, larger than a millstone, tore through the air with a piercing shriek, descending heavily toward your back. Had this strike landed on even a practitioner of the Golden Core realm, it would have surely shattered their body on the spot. As the claw touched the back of your neck and your 2 disciples prepared to unleash their ultimate techniques to save you, your heart skipped a beat. You signaled them to stand down. If you were to be rescued by them now, wouldn't the facade of your useless master persona crumble entirely? And so in that very instant, you let out a wail as wretched as a pig being slaughtered. You intentionally stumbled as if you had tripped over a stone, losing your balance entirely and crashing face first into the ground. With a sharp hiss, the massive wolf of claw grazed just inches above your scalp. Immediately afterward, the claw slammed into the earth with a thunderous boom, carving out a deep crater. You lay sprawled on the ground, groaning and clutching your waist, lamenting loudly that your old bones were surely being protected by the spirits of your ancestors in heaven. The 2 disciples standing nearby were left utterly dumbfounded. The timing of your fall was terrifyingly precise. A fraction too early and it would have looked staged, a fraction too late and it would have been death. This could hardly be mere luck. You were clearly dancing on the edge of a blade. The wolf demon, having missed its target, tilted its head in sheer confusion. It could not comprehend how this weakling of a human had managed to evade its strike. Enraged by its failure, it raised its claw to deliver a follow-up blow. You feigned utter terror, scrambling backward on your hands and feet, while casually throwing debris out from your robes. Scraps of iron, broken copper, and ruined spirit talismans were hurled toward the beast. The wolf demon felt insulted and let out a roar, revealing a blood-stained maw. The foul stench was so overpowering you nearly vomited up your previous night's meal. At this point, your disciples could no longer hold back, but just as they were about to strike, you used your divine sense to command them to stop. A moment of such brilliance as this required your personal intervention. Just as the sharp, deadly fangs were less than a foot from your head, in your panicked state, you grabbed the final object you possessed and flung it with all your might. It was nothing more than a battered bronze bell covered in green rust. Yet under the absolute mastery of an emperor, this broken bell seemed to possess a will of its own, whistling through the air and flying straight into the wolf demon's gaping maw. It wedged itself precisely into the beast's throat. The nascent soul realm great demon, which only a moment ago possessed heaven-shaking power, instantly froze, its eyes bulging in shock, as it let out, unable to vomit yet unable to swallow. The wolf demon began to thrash about on the ground in a state of madness, its claws clawing desperately at its own throat, sending stone shards flying in every direction. With the mountains shaking and the earth trembling, Ye Lingshang and his companion stood completely stunned. A nascent soul stage demon was actually choked to death. You, however, continued your charade, sitting on the ground and slapping your thigh in mock shock. It's gone mad. Could my ancestral broken bell truly be a divine artifact? In truth, you are the only one who knows the reality. At the moment you threw it, you had imbued it with a sliver of an emperor's intent. At this moment, the sound resonated frantically within the wolf demon's sea of consciousness, each toll striking its demonic soul like a heavy sledgehammer. With a crisp cracking sound, the wolf demon's nascent soul, unable to withstand the vibrations, shattered completely. With a heavy thud, the colossal wolf demon collapsed. A mighty nascent soul demon freshly emerged, only to die grievance-filled death from an obstruction in its throat. The female demonic cultivator stared at the scene, her mind suddenly blank. The combat force she had nurtured with all her heart was gone just like that. Such a method of death is truly a legendary humiliation in the world of cultivation. You dusted yourself off and stood up, sighing that performing acts of kindness truly brings the protection of good fortune. Your disciple's mouth twitched uncontrollably. If she did not know the truth, she would have almost believed your deception. However, the moment the danger subsided, the female demonic cultivator completely lost her mind. Her eyes glowed crimson as she unleashed her demonic aura without the slightest restraint. "I will have you all buried with me," she shrieked, knowing her death was inevitable. Casting all caution to the wind, she lunged toward the nearest target, Nangong Manor. The female demonic cultivator burned her life essence, transforming into a blur as she charged straight at Nangong Manor. Her speed reached its peak, so fast that even Yi Lingchong could not react in time. Nangong Manor was so terrified she let out a scream, instinctively squeezing her eyes shut and clutching her head, appearing exactly like a frightened child. She threw out a flurry of chaotic, formless punches, shouting erratically for her to stay away. The demonic cultivator lunged before her, letting out a cold, sharp laugh. She extended her claws, which were shrouded in sinister demonic energy, and just as she was about to crush the girl's throat, no one could have anticipated that Nangong Manor's tiny flailing hand would coincidentally slap the demonic cultivator square on the forehead. After a dull sound, like a ripe watermelon hitting the ground, Nangong Manor opened her eyes, looked at the stain on her hand, and froze in stone-cold shock. The next second, she burst into loud sobs, frantically wiping her hand on her clothes while crying miserably, insisting she had not meant to do it. Who could have expected that this old hag's head would be so fragile? Yu and Yi Lingchuang stood by, watching in speechless disbelief. This was a demonic cultivator at the Golden Core perfection stage. You call this fragile? However, your eyes darted around. You realized this was the perfect excuse to cover your tracks. You immediately assumed the role of the master, rushing over with a look of feigned panic to offer comfort. "Do not be afraid, do not be afraid." This old man clearly had no desire to live. He threw himself into your hands. "Surely, you cannot be blamed for this." Yi Lingchuang hurriedly chimed in, declaring that this was a case of legitimate self-defense. Fearing that others might misunderstand and label this young girl as a peerless murderer, the situation atop the mountain became bizarre to the extreme. You and your two disciples were caught in the middle, one crying, one screaming, and one offering hollow reassurances. Yi Lingchuang wiped cold sweat from her brow and asked you if this matter was finally settled. After all, if news of these two absurd deaths reached the sect, you would undoubtedly be branded as madmen. You instantly shed your look of feigned terror, brushed off your robes, and stood up with an expression of deep, calculating strategy. Pointing at the corpse of the wolf demon, you shook your head repeatedly. "It is not so simple as that," you remarked. You believed it was necessary to arrange a more plausible cause of death for him. For instance, being struck down by heavenly lightning. Nangong Manor looked up, puzzled, wondering where such a thing would come from under such a clear blue sky. You smiled mysteriously at the mention of heavenly lightning and quietly turned away. Deep within your consciousness, you urged Da Huang, who was thousands of miles away. Da Huang, stop sleeping. Quickly turn to the west and sneeze with as much force as you can. Da Huang, resting at Luochen Peak, looked thoroughly annoyed, but it still opened its mouth wide toward the west, inhaling a massive surge of heaven and earth spirit energy. Accompanied by a thunderous roar, a bolt of lightning imbued with Quasi-Emperor level demonic power erupted from its maw. This pillar of purple and gold light tore through the void, streaking directly toward Haifeng Mountain. You and your two disciples looked up at the sky in anticipation, when suddenly a heaven-shaking explosion erupted overhead. A bolt of purple lightning, thick as a water barrel, descended from the heavens, striking the wolf demon's corpse with pinpoint accuracy. The terrifying heat instantly vaporized the nascent soul demon's remains, leaving not even a scrap behind. Even the stones on the ground were melted into molten lava. Nangong Manor and Ye Lingchong were so terrified they could only swallow hard. They stammered, "The heavens have struck with such precision. Witnessing this power, one cannot help but be seized by awe and trepidation." You cursed the damned cur internally for acting with such overwhelming force. Yet, you reacted with lightning speed, dropping to your knees with a heavy thud. You kowtowed repeatedly toward the heavens, shouting, "Thank you, heavens, for having eyes. Thank you, exalted one, for your aid." Seeing this, Ye Lingchong and the others hastily knelt to offer their thanks as well. After paying their respects, the master and his two disciples steadied each other as they stood up. Yi Lingchong brushed the dust off her robes and asked, "Are we not able to return now?" You rolled your eyes and cut her off abruptly. "Return? Return to what? The mission is not yet complete. While the demon master is nowhere to be seen, this pile of ATMs remains scattered across the ground." You gestured toward the unconscious demonic cultivators on the floor. A cold light glinted in your eyes. A top-secret consultation on the art of disguise began. The objective, to convincingly pass yourselves off as severely wounded survivors. Barely 15 minutes later, your hair was a disheveled mess, your clothes were shredded to rags, and your face was smeared with bright red sauce. Yi Lingchong looked even more wretched, her book covered in faux wounds, requiring assistance with every step she took. Nangong Manor clutched her chest, frantically spitting out more of the red sauce. Just then, the long silent system chimed repeatedly in your mind. The hidden mission had been perfectly cleared. Not only had you exceeded the quota for clearing out the demonic lair, but you had also successfully maintained your useless persona. The rewards were so immense they sent a jolt of shock through your very soul. 10,000 years of cultivation were added directly to your account. Furthermore, you received a god-tier substitute puppet capable of withstanding 3 full-force blows from a peak Great Emperor. You lay back on the rocking chair in your courtyard. As you gazed at the long list of statistics before you, a grin stretched wide across your face, reaching from ear to ear. To go out for a mere stroll and return with such insane advancement, this is the divine life a transmigrator was meant to lead. Following this, the 10,000 years of cultivation poured into your Dantian like a collapsing galaxy, driving your breakthrough directly to the peak of the third stage of the Great Emperor realm. Only then did that terrifying surge of progress finally grind to a halt. You skillfully compressed your cultivation within the shelter of the mountain guarding array. While everything remained calm on the outside, a rage. As Yi Lingchong and her companion tallied their spoils, a profound tremor suddenly surged deep within their souls. They stared in absolute terror at the figure feigning sleep upon the rocking chair. Yi Lingchong screamed inwardly, could one truly grow stronger simply by sleeping? She realized she must cling firmly to this golden thigh at all costs. In the blink of an eye, dawn broke on the second day. The three of you donned those tattered, ragged robes once more. Although you had secretly added life-spirit fluid to their water the night before, and their bodies were no longer plagued by pain, for the sake of the sect's immense rewards, this ruse of bitterness had to be acted out until the very end. Thus, an unprecedented spectacle unfolded within the Tianyan sect. 3 figures on the verge of collapse supporting one another, dragging behind them 2 demonic cultivators bound as tightly as Zongzi, stumbling with every step as they made their way toward the sect master's hall. Disciples along the path were so shocked their jaws practically hit the floor. Just as everyone began to speculate wildly, you were busy rehearsing the script in your mind, ensuring your expression was sufficiently filled with indignation. The details must remain vague. If questioned, simply attribute it to the grace of the heavens. At the same time, the sect master's hall was already in an uproar, as Elder Qian presented a pile of ashes from the Bone Wolf demon and the interrogation logs. He was midway through his report when Wang Yiming heard mention of a demon core and heavenly divine lightning. His mind reeled. This sounded like a fabrication from a third-rate novelist, yet the demonic essence within the ashes could not be faked. The gathered elders fell into a collective silence, and Zhao Li's complexion turned uglier than if he had swallowed carrion. He had intended to borrow a knife to kill you and ruin your reputation, yet he had unexpectedly handed you a heaven-sent merit. Just as Zhao Li slammed the table and rose to his feet, bellowing in rage that this was absolutely impossible, he argued that someone long branded a good-for-nothing such as you, leading only 2 fresh disciples, could not possibly have counter-killed a nascent soul great demon. He insisted this must be a fraud, claiming you had colluded with the demonic path to stage a play. Just as the debate within the hall reached its peak, a disciple's resounding announcement echoed from outside. You led your 2 disciples into the spotlight with a dramatic entrance. Everyone turned in unison to stare at the entrance, only to see the 3 of you, disheveled and covered in blood, slowly dragging yourselves into the main hall. Your wretched appearance, battered and disheveled, looked as though you had crawled straight out of a pile of corpses. In particular, the once aloof and untouchable ice beauty Yi Lingchong now looked so frail that even a gentle breeze could topple her. This stark contrast silenced all whispers of suspicion instantly. If not for having truly faced a life-or-death crisis, your performance would be nothing short of heaven-defying. Sensing the astonishment in the surrounding gazes, you were blooming with joy on the inside. Behold, observe, who among them would dare to doubt us now? Truly, you possess no conscience whatsoever. Following this, you led your disciples to the center of the great hall. The next moment, the stoic resolve you had just displayed instantly crumbled. With a heavy thud, the 3 of you collapsed to your knees in unison. You let out a cry so tragic and heart-wrenching that it turned your voice hoarse. Sectmaster, senior brothers, you must obtain justice for us. The indignation and terror within your voice were enough to break anyone's heart. Those who heard it were moved to tears, yet you wiped away your dry, tearless eyes, even as you trembled while accusing the minor demons of Black Wind Mountain. You claimed it was nothing more than a cannibalistic den of the demonic path. You declared that the leading old devil had dared to unleash a nascent soul wolf demon, a beast larger than a house. As you knelt, trembling in the great hall, the 2 exquisite disciples beside you wailed even more piteously. Who could possibly believe that just moments ago, this master and his 2 disciples had slaughtered without blinking? Yet here you were feigning the appearance of those terrorized to the point of losing their wits. You began a vivid dramatic retelling. The wolf demon was too terrifying. Its mere aura was enough to render you breathless. You then pivoted the narrative, clasping your hands before your chest, bowing piously toward the high seat of the great hall. Just as that beast opened its blood-stained maw, the heavens opened their eyes. A bolt of violet gold divine lightning descended from the sky, shattering the wolf demon into dust with a single strike. Having fabricated this utterly absurd tale in one breath, you rolled your eyes back and collapsed weakly to the floor. Sectmaster, the intelligence reports were entirely wrong. You must investigate this matter thoroughly. Sectmaster Wang Yiming sat upon his throne, his expression shifting in unpredictable ways. This story was truly ridiculous and beyond reason, but looking at the miserable state of you and your disciples, and considering the physical evidence presented, he could find no grounds for refutation. In fact, deep down, he wanted to believe it was the truth. After all, if it were not the divine lightning that killed the beast, the secret hidden upon your person would be far more terrifying than a nascent soul demon. Thus he hurried down from his seat to help you up, saying, "Junior brother, you have suffered. I, as sect master, will certainly provide you with an explanation." Hearing these words, a profound sense of calm settled within your heart. At this critical juncture, hanging by a thread, Zhao Lai pointed directly at your nose and lashed out. "Stop with this performance. What heavenly divine lightning? You have clearly colluded with the demonic path, staging this entire ordeal yourself to deceive the sect for rewards. The crime of colluding with the demonic path, if proven, would result in having one's cultivation crippled and being expelled from the sect." Looking at Zhao Li's twisted, aged face, a cold laugh erupted within your heart. "Old man, I have been waiting for you to say exactly that." In the following second, you immediately assumed an expression of profound grievance, your fingers trembling as you pointed at him. "Senior brother Zhao, how could you spout such slander? My disciples and I fought with our lives on the line, yet you seek to drive us into a dead end." Having said this, you suddenly spat out a mouthful of fresh blood, your body went limp, and you fell backward. Ye Lingchong and Nonggong Mara rushed toward you immediately, weeping with heartbreaking intensity. Yi Lingchong then delivered the final blow. "Uncle Master Zhao, is it only because I took the top spot and caused your disciple to lose that you wish to take revenge on us like this?" These words were like daggers piercing the hearts of those present, and the eyes of the surrounding elders shifted as they looked at Zhao Lai. So he was simply using his position to settle a personal vendetta. Wang Yiming's face turned as dark as a soot-covered pot. "Junior brother Zhao, watch your tongue. How can you make such baseless accusations before the matter has been properly investigated?" Zhao Lai, a fellow disciple, was berated until his face turned green. Looking at you unconscious and your two weeping disciples, he was so infuriated that his liver felt as if it were bursting. "This is an act," he thought. "This is absolutely an act. These three wretches are clearly all cunning schemers." Before he could offer a rebuttal, Wang Yiming waved his hand, directly announcing rewards that shocked the entire assembly. Bestowing upon Luochen Feng 10,000 supreme-grade spirit stones, 10 bottles of holy healing elixirs and 50,000 sect contribution points, and granting Ye Lingchong and Nonggong Ma special permission to enter the scripture pavilion to choose their own cultivation techniques. The Great Hall erupted into a frenzy. 10,000 supreme-grade stones amounted to 1,000,000 low-grade spirit stones. As you lay on the ground and heard this, your ears immediately perked up and you felt immense joy in your heart. This mission had been incredibly profitable. Looking back at Zhao Lai, hearing these rewards was no... He exerted immense effort to suppress you, only to result in you reaping a bountiful harvest. Consumed by fury, Zhao Lai felt a surge of sweetness in his throat before coughing up a spray of blood. His eyes rolled back as he collapsed into unconsciousness. You caught a glimpse of this scene through squinted eyes, your heart soaring with immense satisfaction. Let your rage consume you, you old fool. Upon returning to Luochen Peak, the three of you, master and disciples, immediately discarded your disguises. After a grand feast, you reclined comfortably in your armchair, leisurely snacking on melon seeds. Little did you expect that just as you were about to enjoy this moment of tranquility, the system within your mind manifested once more. A new mission was issued: recruit a third direct disciple. The system suggested considering a functional type disciple. You were instantly speechless. What in the world was a functional disciple? As you opened the mission interface and scrutinized the target's information, your eyes nearly bulged out of their sockets. The locked target was Su Qingxian, a mere outer sect miscellaneous disciple of the Heavenly Eye sect. Her unique constitution was the calamity body of 10,000 evils, also referred to as the incarnation of the misfortune god. Upon seeing these words, you gasped, drawing in a sharp breath of cold air. This particular constitution was infamous throughout the cultivation world. One who possesses this physique not only lacks any talent for cultivation, but is plagued by such misfortune that they would encounter trouble even while drinking water. Most terrifyingly, this misfortune was contagious. Anyone who dared to approach her would mysteriously fall victim to a series of unrelenting calamities. At best, one might suffer from cultivation deviation. At worst, they could be struck by lightning the moment they stepped outside. Ancient legends tell of a top-tier sect that once recruited an individual with this constitution. Within less than half a year, their scripture pavilion was razed by fire, their grand elder was crushed to death by a falling meteorite while traveling, leading the entire sect to be cursed into total dissolution. From then on, this constitution became a pariah of the cultivation world, a plague that everyone avoided at all costs. Your eyes twitched uncontrollably as you lashed out at the system. You want me to take in a walking calamity like this as my disciple? Do you think I have lived too long, or is Luochen Peak simply too peaceful for your liking? However, the system responded with an alluring tone. Does the host not realize this is the ultimate form of passive defense? Should anyone dare to trespass upon Luochen Peak, there would be no need for you to lift a finger. Their artifacts would self-destruct, or they would simply plummet into a pit of their own making. The enemy would naturally collapse on the spot. Hearing these words, you are momentarily stunned before a spark of realization flashes through your mind. Indeed, is this not the legendary weapon of causality? Possessing an innate aura of provocation and debility, as long as he does not leave the mountain, the misfortune will only be contained internally. You look down at yourself, then at your two disciples. You are a dignified great emperor in cultivation. Yi Lingshuang possesses the providence of an empress. Nangong Moer is exceptionally resilient and sturdy. They can certainly suppress this. Thus you slap your thigh. I will definitely take this disciple. Next, you rush straight toward the outer sect laborers of the Tianyan sect. At this moment, Su Qingxian is crouching by the riverbank washing clothes. He resides in the most dilapidated thatched hut. Within a radius of 10 feet, not even a blade of grass can grow. Even rats dare not pass by his vicinity. Just then, the washboard in his hand suddenly snaps in half. A piece of wood spins twice in midair before falling into the water. The water splashes with pinpoint accuracy directly onto his face. Su Qian wipes his face expressionlessly, far too weary to even feel anger. Having faced such misfortune 80 times a day, he has long since become completely numb. But in the very next second, he suddenly feels a violent thumping in his heart. Looking up, he sees a streak of flowing light rushing toward him. However, it loses control entirely the moment it stops above his head. Then, accompanied by your miserable cry, both man and flying sword plummet straight down. With a deafening explosion, his already unstable thatched hut is crushed halfway by your impact. With a face covered in grime, you crawl out from the debris, spitting out mud while cursing furiously. This malicious calamity physique truly lives up to its reputation. Before even meeting face to face, it has already dealt you a painful blow. If you weren't so physically resilient, this fall would surely have left you paralyzed. You look up to meet the hollow, numb expression of Su Qingxian. You quickly clear your throat, struggling to maintain your composure. You are Su Qingxian. This seat is the Peak Master of Luochen Peak. I have come today specifically to take you as my disciple. Su Qingxian looked at your dust-covered face as if he were looking at a fool. Senior brother, this place of mine is quite ominous. You should leave quickly. Unexpectedly, you merely flicked your sleeve and lunged forward to seize his wrist. The myriad evil poison physique? This seat was looking precisely for you. At the very moment you took hold of him, Su Qingxian's heart skipped a beat, thinking to himself that this man was about to face a great calamity. Sure enough, in the next instant, your foot suddenly slipped violently. You happened to step right on a moss-covered stone. You lost all control and tumbled backward. And not far behind you was an uncovered deep well. The two disciples following behind to watch the commotion immediately cried out in horror. Just as you were about to plunge headfirst into the depths of the well, an incredibly profound and terrifying aura erupted from your body. The terrestrial gravity field instantly activated. The invisible force of misfortune pulling you into the well was forcibly suppressed by you. Your body ground to a halt in midair. Then you stood upright in an eerily supernatural manner. You exhaled in relief, cursing inwardly at how potent this jinxing power was. Even with the cultivation of a great emperor, you nearly met with an embarrassing disaster while trying to maintain your composure. Dusting yourself off, you looked triumphantly at the dumbfounded Su Qingxian. How was that? This bit of misfortune is nothing more than a mosquito bite to this seat. From today onward, you are my third direct disciple. Without further words, you dragged the dazed youth and soared straight toward Luochen Peak. However, the moment Su Qingxian set foot on Luochen Peak, the very atmosphere of the entire mountain shifted completely. The once clear sky was instantly veiled by dark clouds, and the birds in the trees took flight as if fleeing a catastrophe. The koi in the pond buried themselves deep in the mud, not daring to show their heads, while even the yellow dog in the courtyard tucked its tail in terror, spinning frantically. Forcing yourself to remain calm, you led him to the rear mountain. It is a peaceful little courtyard, isn't it? You rest here. Your master will go fetch some daily necessities for you. Having said that, you intended to slip away quickly, to carefully research how to deal with this cursed physique. Never in your wildest dreams did you expect that the moment you turned around, an earth-shattering explosion would suddenly erupt from the rear mountain. Your heart sank as an extremely ominous premonition surged into your mind. You rushed over frantically, only to be petrified by the sight before you. You saw the patch of divine herbs that you had painstakingly cultivated, now completely. Half of the ground instantly collapsed, forming a massive deep crater. Priceless divine herbs were buried alive where they stood. The vast majority of these divine herbs were thoroughly entombed beneath the earth. The few that remained were left crushed and reeling. Seeing them on the verge of death, your heart ached as if your own backbone were breaking. You let out a gut-wrenching, tragic cry of despair. This was your entire fortune, accumulated through immense hardship and effort. This wretched physique, before it could even face an outside enemy, why must it first torment its own master? Why has this thing suddenly begun to bleed in such a manner? You were truly left wanting to weep, yet no tears would fall. You then turned your gaze toward a spot not far away. Su Qingxian stood with her head bowed like a child who had committed a grave error, her heart filled with boundless remorse. What kind of passive defense was this supposed to be? This was nothing less than an indiscriminate attack on friend and foe alike. Forgive me, master, I truly did not mean for this to happen, Su Qingxian murmured in a low, choked voice. He had long grown accustomed to a fate where, wherever he went, calamity would surely follow. Yet you had to grit your teeth and endure a pain as sharp as knives cutting through flesh. You forced a smile that looked more pained than any sob. It is fine, I do not blame you. If the old does not depart, the new cannot arrive. While you comforted your disciple on the surface, internally, you were coughing up blood from sheer frustration. You had chosen this disciple yourself. Now you had to swallow the bitterness and continue her tutelage. However, you knew better than anyone else that life simply could not continue this way. You had to suppress this cursed streak of misfortune immediately. In the next instant, your gaze sharpened. The hidden cultivation base within your body began to circulate with a violent intensity. An invisible, domineering force erupted with you at its center, sweeping across the entirety of Luochen Peak and pressing down with absolute authority. This will was powerful to the extreme, forcefully crushing the restless mist of misfortune until it was utterly extinguished. In an instant, the dark clouds looming in the sky completely vanished. Even Da Huang out in the courtyard ceased his anxious pacing. That terrifying sensation, the feeling that a great calamity could strike at any moment, had finally vanished without a trace. Yiling Shuang and Nonggong Mar simultaneously breathed a sigh of relief, their eyes filled with deep admiration as they gazed upon you. As for Su Qingshin, he was struck by a shock beyond all description. He could clearly feel the sinister, chaotic power within his body, a force that had long sought to bring ruin. Now finally silenced, returning to an unprecedented state of total tranquility. He stared blankly at you, a man whose domineering aura suppressed the entire field. His once numb heart suddenly trembled with intense emotion. Could it be that this man truly possessed the power to defy the heavens and change one's fate? In the days that followed, life at Luochen Peak descended into absolute chaos. Yiling Zhuang forcibly maintained a safe distance of 3 zhang at all times. The moment anyone stepped within this range, even if their divine sense detected nothing, and the surroundings appeared empty, a stone would materialize out of thin air, striking him squarely on the forehead. Meanwhile, the thick-skinned Nonggong mare was even more eccentric, enthusiastically dragging Su Qingxian to the back mountain to hunt rabbits. The result? No sooner had they stepped out the door than Nonggong Mar plummeted directly into a massive 2-meter-deep pit. Faced with Su Qingxian's tearful apologies, Nonggong Mar simply brushed the dust off her clothes, utterly unbothered. She even went as far as to praise the quality of the excavation, claiming it was a perfect spot to bury a corpse. Faced with these two peculiar disciples, you found yourself in a state of bittersweet agony. You were pleased by the vast increase in your cultivation, and the fact that you could keep the surrounding influence entirely under your control. The pain, however, came from the divine herbs you had painstakingly cultivated, whose growth had suddenly begun to wither and stagnate. This was the hard-earned wealth your master built with blood, sweat, and tears. As you looked upon those drooping, lifeless divine herbs, the heartache was so profound you could barely breathe. Even then, you were still calculating a way to permanently resolve the god of calamity constitution so that you could continue your low-key secluded lifestyle. However, the troubles of the cultivation world are always more fatal than one can imagine. At that moment, deep within the Yin demon sect, a woman clad in a crimson blood robe sat cross-legged amidst a pool of blood. This was the Yin demon patriarch, the 7th elder of the Yin demon sect, a master at the soul transformation stage. Suddenly, a crisp cracking sound rang out as a blood-red jade slip hanging from her waist shattered instantly. The patriarch's eyes snapped open, and the entire blood pool began to boil violently in an instant. Who dared to kill my son? A roar filled with endless killing intent echoed throughout the underground palace. For that was her only illegitimate son. He believed that leaving his bloodline in a desolate wasteland like Black Wind Mountain was the safest option, never imagining they would be directly slaughtered. Utilizing the residual aura on the jade tablet, he locked onto the direction of the Heaven Eye sect. Heaven Eye sect, how bold of you. To avoid alerting the soul transformation powerhouses of the great righteous sects, Ancestor Yin Ba's eyes flickered as he immediately decided to disguise himself as an ordinary golden core demonic cultivator to infiltrate for his revenge. He intended to ensure that the one who killed his son at Falling Dust Peak would suffer a fate where not even the dogs or chickens were spared. At this moment, you were lying in your courtyard, enjoying a moment of leisure, when suddenly an intense wave of palpitations washed over you. As if being stared down by a truly terrifying existence, you abruptly opened your eyes. Your divine sense silently expanded in an instant, covering a radius of 100 miles. A soul transformation level 7 old monster, your eyelids began to twitch uncontrollably. Furthermore, there was an incredibly faint and concealed demonic aura, silently creeping toward the Heaven Eye sect. What is this fellow doing, sneaking into our sect in broad daylight? Your heart was filled with questions. You were usually so low profile that you barely stepped outside, making it impossible to have offended a soul transformation expert. Suddenly, a realization flashed through your mind as you recalled the individual your disciple had crushed at Black Wind Mountain. Curse it all. Could this be a classic case of striking the young and bringing out the old? You reflexively gasped, drawing in a sharp breath of cold air. Your current persona was that of a useless peak master, yet now a soul transformation old monster was knocking on your very door. If you did not act, the peak would be destroyed. If you did, your low-profile Tao would be instantly shattered. Stroking your chin, your gaze instantly became profound. It seemed you had no choice but to utilize that. Night fell and the entire Heaven Eye sect was draped in silence. With the sect grand competition having just concluded, the disciples' vigilance was at an all-time low. At this critical juncture, a dark shadow like a spectral phantom silently infiltrated the borders of the Heaven Eye sect. This individual was none other than Ancestor Yinba in disguise. He had perfectly suppressed his entire soul transformation aura, moving as if through an uninhabited land, bypassing layer upon layer of defensive formations. The defenses of this Heaven Eye sect amount to nothing more than this. Ancestor Yinba sneered coldly within his heart. As he prepared to charge toward Falling Dust Peak to begin his slaughter, in an instant, Ancestor Yinba locked onto the location of Luochen Peak. Looking at the seemingly ordinary mountain before him, killing intent surged in his eyes. A mere useless peak master of the profound spirit realm, along with a few small fry, actually dared to kill my kin. Today I will ensure you all die without a whole corpse. Then, not even bothering to conceal his presence, his terrifying soul transformation stage cultivations erupted completely as he charged directly toward the mountain gate. With a world-shaking explosion, the mountain protecting array, strong enough to withstand nascent soul stage attacks, was like thin paper before him, shattered into pieces by a single kick. Enemy attack! Enemy attack! The piercing toll of the alarm bell suddenly echoed throughout Luochen Peak. Yiling Chang and the other two, who were sound asleep, were startled awake and rushed into the courtyard in a panic. Has a spirit beast invaded? But as they reached the courtyard, they collided with you, looking utterly frantic and disheveled, as you screamed at the top of your lungs while scrambling toward the rear mountain. Disciples, run! A soul transformation old monster has come for our lives. Upon hearing the words soul transformation stage, the faces of the three women instantly turned ashen. This was a terrifying existence, one capable of walking unhindered across the divine continent. Since when did Luochen Peak provoke such an ancestor? I will see where you can possibly hide. A bone-chilling voice suddenly boomed from above. The three looked up in horror, seeing a woman in black robes shrouded in overwhelming demonic qi, staring down at them as if they were already dead. It was you who killed my son, Shui Lang. However, Nonggong Ma possessed of the most aggressive temperament, immediately shouted back, "Who knows who your son is?" But when she heard the words Black Wind Mountain and Shui Lang, her face turned deathly pale. Was this not the demonic cultivator who was scared to death by Big Yellow Sneeze, and then reduced to mincemeat by her single palm strike? That man truly met his retribution. So you were the mother of that unlucky fool? As Nonggong Ma blurted this out, and upon hearing this wonderful description, you, who were pretending to flee, almost couldn't help yourself, nearly bursting into laughter on the spot. Presumptuous, how dare you insult me? Ancestor Yinba was instantly enraged to the extreme. He suddenly raised his hand, gathering a pressure so intense it made it difficult to breathe. A massive blood-colored palm print slammed down directly toward Nonggong Ma head. This was a strike fueled by the fury of a soul transformation old monster. If it connected, Nonggong Ma who was only at the peak of the Foundation establishment stage, would be obliterated. They would certainly be reduced to a pile of mangled flesh on the spot. In this critical moment, hanging by a thread, Yiling Shuang's expression shifted drastically. No longer concerned with concealing her true strength, the golden core spiritual energy within her body erupted like a violent volcano. In an instant, she condensed a shield of extreme frost before her. The palm print slammed into the shield. Though it seemed indestructible, the frost barrier held for only a second before shattering with a deafening boom. Yiling Shuang abruptly spat out a mouthful of fresh blood, her entire body forced back more than 10 paces. Even the solid rock beneath her feet was carved with 2 deep footprints from the impact. A flash of extreme shock crossed the eyes of Ancestor Yinba. A girl who appeared to be only in the qi refining stage was actually able to withstand 30% of his power. No wonder you were able to kill my son. But before absolute strength, you shall all perish today. In the next second, the killing intent radiating from him surged wildly. This time, he directly unleashed 50% of his might. A terrifying blood-red hand, twice the size of the previous one, carrying a momentum capable of destroying heaven and earth, pressed down toward the 3 women. Facing a killing blow that could level the entire rear mountain, Yiling Zhuang and Nonggong Mo fell into utter despair. At this life-or-death juncture, they instinctively looked toward their master, the man who usually seemed unreliable, yet always managed to create miracles. However, the scene before them left them completely speechless. You were cowering behind a water vat in the corner, with only your head peeking out, trembling in apparent terror. Don't be afraid, my disciples, your master is thinking of a way. As your trembling voice echoed through the courtyard, they nearly spat blood in frustration. Their sect was on the verge of annihilation, yet you were still putting on an act. Yet, at this hair-raising moment of peril, an inconceivable anomaly suddenly erupted. A blinding golden after-image shot out directly from the nearby chicken coop. Its speed was so immense that it instantly tore through the terrifying pressure of the soul transformation stage ancestor. Ancestor Yinba's pupils instantly contracted to the size of needlepoints. Before he could even discern what that thing was, the golden after-image collided violently with the world-shattering blood hand. Following another ear-splitting explosion, that blood-red palm print, which could have instantly killed a golden core cultivator, was pierced and shattered on the spot. Without losing any momentum, the golden after-image charged directly toward Ancestor Yinba's face with murderous intent. What on earth is that? Begone. Ancestor Yinba let out a terrified roar. Tearing through the sky, a powerhouse of the soul transformation stage had unexpectedly been blinded in his left eye by the peck of a rooster. He clutched his bleeding eye socket, stumbling backward in a daze. Not only was he driven mad by the pain, but even Yiling Shuang and her companions were frozen in shock by the sight. A mere rooster used for morning calls had actually managed to cripple a soul transformation ancestor. At this moment, the calamitous golden rooster stood with majestic poise atop the courtyard wall, its vibrant 5-colored tail feathers fluttering brilliantly in the wind, looking down from on high at the wailing ancestor Yinba, as a hint of disdain flickered within its bean-sized eyes. Nonggong Mare's face was filled with disbelief as she asked, "Is this not the rooster you raised on the back mountain, the one that crows on time every day? Normally, aside from having slightly smoother feathers, it possesses no spiritual energy whatsoever. How can its combat power be as formidable as a god of war?" Within Yi Lingshuang's heart, waves of shock surged. A single peck had crippled him. To cripple a soul transformation ancestor, this creature must at least be at the peak of the nascent soul stage, or perhaps even an ancient divine beast of the soul transformation rank. Immediately after, she instinctively stared at the pond in the corner of the courtyard, where a single fish was still being kept. Ancestor Yinba's sole remaining right eye turned blood red. A grand titan of the demonic path had been ruined by a mere piece of poultry. If word of this were to spread, how could he ever show his face again? With a heaven-shaking roar, terrifying black and red demonic flames erupted from his body, carrying a frightening heat capable of incinerating all things. The surrounding flora was instantly reduced to ash as he wildly swung his arms, sending a sky-covering rain of demonic fire down upon the back mountain courtyard like a meteor shower. This is bad. Run, quickly! Yi Lingshuang's face turned deathly pale. To be touched by this soul transformation demonic fire meant certain death. She grabbed Nonggong Mare and Tu Qingshan, turning to flee. However, the overwhelming demonic flames had already sealed off every path of retreat. Just as the three girls fell into despair, the man who had been crouching behind the water jar finally stood tall. He casually picked up a worn wooden ladle used for watering flowers, indifferently scooped half a ladle of clean water from the jar, and tossed it toward the sky. Never would anyone have expected that this ordinary ladle of water would transform into a torrential downpour upon meeting the wind, tightly enveloping the entire back mountain courtyard. Even this so-called inextinguishable ladle, the moment it touched the rainwater, not even a wisp of struggling blue smoke could rise before it was utterly extinguished. The Yinba ancestor's sole remaining eye bulged in shock. This was an artifact he had painstakingly refined with his own life's blood essence. How could his indestructible demonic fire be doused by a mere half ladle of plain water? Immediately after, his gaze locked onto the man still holding that tattered ladle. Could this useless individual, who possessed only the aura of the profound spirit realm, truly be Luochen Peak's hidden trump card? Just who are you? The Yinba ancestor's voice trembled uncontrollably. His soul transformation stage demonic fire had been extinguished with a casual flick. This was undoubtedly an existence of the same caliber, or perhaps someone even more terrifying. Observing the panicked state of the Yinba ancestor, you felt a slight stir within your heart. You had merely borrowed a fragment of the water-type law from the greater earth realm. This charade had to continue. I am but a very ordinary peak master. You held the tattered ladle, your face a mask of feigned innocence and confusion. How could the water in this vat be so powerful? Could it be that our founding ancestor has manifested his spirit? The three women present, hearing your blatant and unskilled lie, all rolled their eyes in unison. Master, your acting is truly excessive. Yet, on second thought, in this moment of life and death, feigning ignorance and shifting the credit to the ancestor is indeed the most reliable way to survive. Little did you know, this act completely ignited the Yinba ancestor's fury. First, he was humiliated by a Foundation Establishment junior. Then, his eye was pecked out by a mere chicken. And now, he was being toyed with like a monkey by a piece of profound spirit realm trash. Stop playing the fool. Today no one can save you. Die for me. The Yinba ancestor had completely lost his sanity. He unleashed his ultimate demonic technique, the sky-swallowing demonic sound, and with a roar that rent the heavens, a massive infinite rift tore open in the void behind him. A sea of blood, forged from slaughter and resentment, surged forth with a deafening howl. The entirety of Luochen Peak was instantly shrouded in a lethal crimson light as the temperature plummeted toward freezing. Yi Lingshuang fell to her knees in utter despair. This was the supreme art of the Yin demon sect, capable of devouring an entire minor world. An ant such as her would surely be torn to pieces today. Master, what should we do? The three disciples simultaneously turned their pleading gazes towards you. Lifting your head to gaze at the overwhelming sea of blood pressing down from the heavens, you let out a cold laugh within your heart. This old fool truly will not shed a tear until he sees his own coffin. Are you truly going to force me to reveal my hidden hand? Fine, today I shall let you witness the true strength of Luochen Feng. In the next heartbeat, you suddenly slapped your thigh, pointing toward the pond in the corner of the courtyard and shouting aloud, "Oh dear, this sea is far too vast. I wonder if the fish in my pond will drown." The entire field fell deathly silent as lines of sheer disbelief appeared on everyone's brows. Master, your priorities are completely skewed. Our sect is on the verge of annihilation, yet you are worried about whether your fish will drown? Even as the disciples were internally screaming in frustration, a truly bizarre sight unfolded. The descending sea of blood, capable of total destruction, suddenly ground to a halt the moment it reached the edge of the pond, as if slamming into an invisible wall of lamentation. Immediately after, a murky bubble rose to the surface and a large fish, looking no different from those sold in a common market, slowly emerged. It rolled its dead glassy eyes toward the sky, then tilted its head to look at the man holding the tattered ladle. Lazily, it opened its mouth and spat a glob of thick phlegm-like fluid toward the sea of blood looming in the firmament. That seemingly ordinary spit traced a terrifying arc through the air before plunging directly into the vast, overwhelming sea of blood. A deafening, crackling explosion rang out, much like cold water being poured into a cauldron of boiling oil. That soul transformation-level sea of blood, which could devour mountains and rivers, began to corrode and melt frantically the instant it touched that single spit. The remaining right eye of Yinba ancestor nearly bulged out of its socket. His ultimate demonic art, rumored to be capable of swallowing entire minor worlds, was being dismantled on the spot by the spit of a dead fish. As he desperately circulated his demonic cultivation to salvage the situation, the terrifying corrosiveness spread like ink in water, expanding uncontrollably. In the blink of an eye, the entire sky-covering sea of blood was dyed pitch black. Then, accompanied by a world-shattering sound of shattering, the boundless sea of blood completely disintegrated, transforming into countless droplets of black rain that hammered down upon the earth. Ancient trees nearby instantly withered into ash, and the ground was eaten away, forming countless bottomless pits. Yinba's ancestor had no time to evade. His protective demonic chi, in which he took great pride, was as fragile as paper before this black rain. A wretched scream tore through the air. The moment the black rain touched his flesh, his right arm vanished into nothingness. This was certainly no ordinary pet fish's spit. This fish was undoubtedly an ancient malevolent beast harboring lethal primeval poison. First, a golden rooster blinded divine eyes, and now a dead fish spat forth a soul-dissolving secretion. This was no longer Luochen Peak. It was clearly an ancient forbidden zone that devoured its victims whole, leaving not even a bone behind. Driven by pure survival instinct, he no longer cared for the dignity of a demonic path overlord. He gritted his teeth, enduring agony as if being sliced 1,000 times, frantically squeezing out his final sliver of demonic chi to transform into a desolate streak of bloody light that surged from the earth, and without a single backward glance, he fled desperately toward the horizon. At that moment, you stared at the panicked, fleeing streak of bloodlight and let out a cold sneer. Trying to escape? Have you asked the consent of the livestock filling this yard? You did not even bother to lift your gaze, but simply commanded in a low voice, Da Huang. The large yellow dog who had been lazily watching the spectacle finally stirred its lethargic frame. With great reluctance, it pushed itself up from the ground, suddenly opened its massive maw and took a deep breath. An earth-shattering sneeze erupted, tearing through the heavens themselves. In the next instant, a bolt of purple-gold divine lightning, thicker than a water barrel, blasted forth from the dog's mouth. The speed of this quasi-emperor level lightning was bone-chilling. In a flash, it locked onto the fleeing streak of bloodlight. Ancestor Yinba didn't even have time to scream in terror before the purple-gold divine lightning struck its mark. His mangled body, already riddled with wounds, could not withstand the impact for even half a second, instantly dissolving into nothingness in mid-air, and dragging his nascent soul along to be utterly obliterated. In the final second before his demise, his sole remaining eye was filled with absolute dread. What kind of freakish monsters are these creatures? In an instant, the back mountain of Luochen Peak returned to a deathly silence, leaving behind only the deep pits corroded by the black fish and the scorched scent of lightning lingering in the air. Lingxing and his two junior sisters stood frozen like stone statues. Their minds had ground to a complete halt. A rooster had blinded a soul transformation stage ancestor. A fish had dissolved a supreme demonic technique with its spit, and now could slay even a deity transformation expert in the blink of an eye. The three of them simultaneously swallowed hard, feeling a profound sense of disbelief toward this absurd world. Then, in perfect unison, they stiffly turned their heads to stare at the person standing right beside them. Just how deep was the cultivation realm master had been hiding? Under the intense gaze of those three pairs of eyes, your scalp felt numb. This charade absolutely could not show any flaws. Suddenly, you slumped to the ground, slapping your thigh without hesitation, and began to wail piteously. Oh heavens, that nearly scared me to death. That old monster is finally dead. It must be the ancestor spirit protecting us, you cried, even feigning a look of utter terror. Your fearful gaze pointed toward the cats and dogs in the courtyard, who had already regained their calm demeanor. The world has truly gone mad. I only planted a few common herbs, yet the chickens and dogs in this house have all mutated. Observing your disastrously exaggerated acting skills, the hearts of your three disciples were as clear as a mirror. Master, please do continue your performance, they thought. We understand this is all for the sake of the Tao, and to remain humble and survive in this cruel cultivation world. Yi Lingzhuang was the first to react, nodding her head fervently. Master is right, this is absolutely a mutation. The divine herbs Master grows are peerless under the heavens. Though Nonggong Moer reacted half a beat late, she was quick to follow suit. Master Qingshuan shouted, staring at him with even more adoration. His heart surged with a desire to scream. Not only could his master suppress his cursed constitution, but even the cats and dogs he raised were heaven-defyingly powerful. He was determined to cling tightly to this golden thigh and never let go. This was quite the spectacle. The four of you, master and disciples, one acting like a madman, while the other three feigned ignorance. Everyone exchanged glances in perfect understanding, and immediately shouted in unison. Beyond Luochen Peak, the world is far too dangerous. We must remain well hidden here on Luochen Peak. If you discovered that the grass carp in your pond could spit out treasures, and even the ants you kept could slay gods, what would you do? As the master of Luochen Peak, you spent your days scolding a group of divine beasts, not only despising Big Yellow, the dog whose quasi-emperor cultivation was far too flashy, you even complained that the 10,000-year vermilion fruit was too difficult to eat. Simply because you transmigrated into this cultivation world and were utterly terrified of death, you fortified your entire mountain to the teeth. You originally intended to rely on your reputation as a useless peak master to live in seclusion until the end of time. Who would have thought the sect would force you to take a disciple? And you casually chose as a trash disciple with the lowest second-grade talent. Little did you know, she was actually a reincarnated empress seeking to regain her former glory. As she stepped into the rear mountain with a cold and arrogant demeanor, she saw 100,000-year divine herbs growing everywhere. This empress, who once dominated the entire universe, was instantly so terrified that her Dao heart utterly collapsed. Possessing the cultivation of a quasi-emperor, this simple-looking dog, Da Huang, before her eyes, radiated an imperial pressure so suffocating it was impossible to breathe. Even the aura deep within its bloodline belonged to the Qilin, a divine beast that had vanished for eons. A legendary Quasi-Emperor Qilin was actually serving as a mere watchdog for you at Luochen Peak. She then turned her gaze toward the fish in the pond, each one radiating an extraordinary spiritual domain. Even the weeds and green bamboo by the roadside possessed the terrifying essence of ancient spiritual medicines. Her initial intentions of using and relying on you were instantly shattered by reality. Just what kind of celestial realm was this Luochen Peak? Ignoring her astonishment, you led her directly into the room and casually mentioned awakening her constitution. Although her face appeared obedient, she was inwardly laughing with cold disdain. A mere profound spirit realm cultivator wanting to help an empress awaken her power? Truly, he overestimated himself. Yet you stopped at the critical moment and gave Da Huang a kick. Da Huang, you do it. Make it quick. I need to get some sleep. While Ye Lingshuang was still silently cursing you, Da Huang simply exhaled a gentle breath toward her. In an instant, golden Qilin essence surged, completely filling her meridians. Within just a few breaths, her cultivation levels skyrocketed on the spot. Even the Saint Ice Constitution origin within her body began to shake violently. A single breath was equal to 10,000 years of bitter cultivation in her past life. Next, you led her to the rear mountain, a wasteland overgrown with weeds. Yi Lingshuang originally thought you were leading her to pull weeds, but as you casually brushed aside those overgrowth, what was revealed were the 9-leaf phoenix grass and the 10,000-year pearl leaves, and even the legendary dragon soul grass. These divine medicines, capable of driving the entire world into a frenzy, were planted by you like common cabbage, scattered carelessly across the wasteland. Watching this, her heart bled with pain. This was no vegetable garden, but an ancient medicinal field that even the gods would wage war to possess. A single casual remark from you nearly drove the reincarnated empress to the brink of madness on the spot. Seeing the 9-leaf phoenix grass and 10,000-year pearls obscured by weeds everywhere, Yi Lingshuang's eyes widened. In her sight were divine herbs sufficient to ignite a world-ending war, yet in your eyes they were merely neglected plants in a patch of wild land. A sight even more devastating suddenly unfolded before her. Da Huang rushed forward, lunging at the 10,000-year pearl fruits to gnaw on them indiscriminately, completely treating the divine medicine like common beans as he chewed. You even kicked him away in disdain, scolding him that if he ate too much, he would go into heat again later. Yi Lingshuang was completely petrified. This man and his dog were truly the greatest profligates in the myriad heavens and realms. Next, you pointed at several large carrots nearby, telling a low cultivation practitioner like her to just have a few bites. Little did she know, upon closer inspection, those were clearly 3,000-year-old purple blood ginsengs. With a complex state of mind, she took a small bite, and the pure medicinal power surged instantly. The pure medicinal energy exploded within her body in the blink of an eye. Her cultivation soared like a rising rocket, surging from the 4th stage of qi refining straight to the peak of the 9th stage. Even the sacred ice physique origin within her began to thaw rapidly under the violent impact of this medicinal power. Just as she was rejoicing, thinking she was about to achieve a breakthrough to foundation establishment, you looked at the system panel showing only a 5% awakening progress, falling into deep thought. Could 3,000-year-old divine medicine only produce such a meager effect? You felt that this wasn't like taking a disciple, but rather feeding a bottomless pit. It seemed that if you didn't use some truly potent medicine for this empress, the awakening mission would remain a distant dream. Watching Yi Lingshuang desperately refining the medicinal power, you couldn't help but sigh. Merely consuming herbs was not enough. One must cultivate both internally and externally. And so, with a glint in your eye, a brilliant idea struck you. Just eating carrots wouldn't be enough for your disciple.